All right, and start recording in three, two, and one. All right, and welcome back to the Reserve Squad Midweek Show, soccer podcast covering all things in the EPL from a bench perspective. I'm your host, Ben, and since we last let off, we have had the transfer window that is finally shut, and Liverpool do, in fact, get Alexander Isak, and there'll be more on that a little bit later on. Mr. Henry, Mr. Edwards, and Mr. Hughes, I am very sorry for doubting you. As a Liverpool fan, I've gone through some of these windows where it hasn't necessarily worked out, though. There was, still the year end rejection that seems to always kind of happen in these, from Bellingham to Chouameni to last season with Subamendi. So that continued to happen with Mark Gahey. We'll get to that as well. They can possibly go back for him in January if that is the idea. It looks like they had something in place, and then the Crystal Palace the Crystal Palace owner and manager kind of went into a little bit of a fight where it looks like Oliver Glasner threatened to walk away. So Mark Gahey, we'll probably get to that a little bit later on. Mark Gahey is kind of the one guy who didn't hold out. He continued playing. He actually scored a goal in the final game. Everyone kind of thought that was going to be a nice little send off. They had a chance to sell him last summer as well. They held out, and the reason why, and they were rewarded for holding out because Mark Gahey was a big reason why they were able to win a title for them last season. And you kind of do feel a little bit for Crystal Palace fans because they've turned around and a bit of a victim of their own success because they scouted very, very well in the championship to locate people like Eberechi Eze and Michel Olise. They lost Olise, and then they turn around, and this summer they've just lost Eze to Arsenal, and it looks like Liverpool are trying to get Mark Gahey. Adam Wharton will certainly have some suitors as well for them. So it's kind of damned if you do and don't for Crystal Palace fans. Kind of a little bit of the cycle of, if you are a soccer fan of a not one of the quote unquote big six clubs, which is worth saying as well. But anyways, we've got a lot to kind of get into. I have taken a little while to get to this, but I did want to talk about it mostly because Liverpool and Arsenal did play each other. And I mean, it's a 1-0 affair. Dominic Szoboszlai has an amazing free kick. Everyone already kind of knows about this. But what I want to really speak about this game in particular is what happened in the second half. And it's not even like Liverpool carved Arsenal up, where there were loads of chances and everything was hunky dory. Raya had to be really on his toes. That didn't really happen, but I feel like it could have, or maybe it should have. And the thing that really excites me is just watching, one, how much different the first half was to the second, and that'll be one of the big themes that I spend most of my time speaking about. But really, how good Liverpool were at playing through lines and finding out different, finding where the extra man was in almost every instance in that second half. They seemed to really find a way to they figured out Arsenal in a sense in that second half. And it didn't lead to chances, but they were getting into the final third where I think it's better decision making or maybe better uh better layoffs or passes. Just like the final action was off. But in the first half, they weren't even able to get any touches in the Arsenal box. Like Arsenal really had them shut down, and we did see some changes. And so I'll spend a little bit of time speaking about those changes. Arsenal went from really dominating in the first half to just being thankful that it was just kind of a nil-nil, kind of nothing game. We'll also speak a little bit about what Arsenal went to line up with. I think that kind of played a little bit into, or actually, that played a big role in why we saw the type of game that we did. It didn't really feel like anyone deserved to win it, but anyone that laid it out, because it wasn't the most entertaining game as far as chances go, like I did speak about. But anyone that did, stick with it was rewarded with an unbelievable goal by Liverpool's maybe new right back in Dominic Szoboszlai. And I'm not even saying that in jest anymore. And we saw this a little bit versus Newcastle. And we see it here. Nice little Trent impression here. And so I think my first reaction to this was they really did get away with this, but also they haven't really had the best, 3 games to into the season. They've been able to get away with every single game so far, and the number of finishes, like, each week seems to just kinda be, one-upping itself, and you don't imagine this can last, for a season, but that said, they haven't really gotten into full gear yet. Salah hasn't gotten into full gear yet. And yet, Warts hasn't gotten into full gear yet as well, though he probably looked as good as he has, at least so far, in this early little stretch. But the main thing is Liverpool have not, hit the ground running, full speed ahead yet, and they just signed probably the best striker in Europe, not named Erling Haaland. So, yeah, they are maybe a little weak at the back. Getting Mark Gahey, if they had gotten Mark Gahey in, I think I would be ready to be full blown homer that they were about to do something really special. Now, an injury to Ganate, the depth behind him is an 18-year-old in Leone who is highly sought after, but at the same time, 18 years old, and yes, he does have senior experience playing for Parma, but at the same time, not necessarily in the league itself. And so, anything happens to Kanate or Van Dijk, the options behind them is very scant. Also, do you place Dominic Szoboszlai at right back, and do you just continue that because he offers a lot of the things that Alexander Arnold was doing last season. Now that kind of changes Jeremy Frimpong's role. Maybe you play Jeremy Frimpong a little higher up, and maybe he's actually the Salah, not necessarily replacement, but maybe someone that can come on to give Salah some rest. Or maybe those games when Salah's going to be away for African Cup of Nations, maybe that can be the idea. Maybe the idea is you rotate a little bit more. Connor Bradley still is someone to feature somewhere along as well, but none of those, Frimpong and Bradley, they can advance the ball by carrying it. They don't really have the vision that Szoboszlai has, or in my opinion, even the motor as well. Now, Frimpong does, is probably the fastest player in the team, but Szoboszlai maybe is close to that. So it's not even like you're defensively vulnerable, but the main thing is just you have an extra general on the field when you can play someone like him, and it basically that second half, the way Arsenal were just they did not know how to play him, and it really did remind me a lot of how Liverpool had been using Alexander Arnold as kind of like the puzzle solver, essentially, and that's really what we saw in that second. And they just the way the positions that he was taking up, the kind of runs he was doing, he was also providing some really nice crossfield balls as well. And we'll kind of get into that a little bit in detail, but man, Szoboszlai was amazing, in this game, and so Liverpool's roster is starting to kind of take fold a little bit, and we're now fully in the Arne Slot kind of era. No more Alexander Arnold, no more Robinson, at least in the sense of already starting it. And that's another thing too. When we get to this game, a lot of people thought Kirkez was going to be vulnerable versus someone like Madueke, and Kirkez did a job on him, like a lot of people really were not expecting. So you've got 2 new fullbacks, coming in. They've lost a lot of people in the Klopp era, and, no more Darwin Núñez, no more, Luis Diaz, as well, and they've turned around and brought in Ekitike, they brought in Wirtz. Wirtz was like the EPL record signing, and then they turned around and did another, EPL record signing, and they were able to do that because they really they brought in so much income over the last couple of years by winning as much as they've done, and they haven't really invested a ton of that in the past. They have upped their wage bill, but they hadn't really done anything outside of that. And again, that was where there were so many years, so many sagas. I mentioned Zubimendi. Yeah, the year before that, it was Moses Caicedo, where you had one of those instances where it seemed like Liverpool had this giant sum of money that they were ready to shell out, essentially, and it seemed like there was an agreement in place, and then Caicedo's agent turned around and went to Chelsea instead, and there have been a number of those kind of instances. When there was this talk, they had that money set aside for Jude Bellingham, and they weren't able to get him either, and there it was like a running theme that. Liverpool were it would be like kind of a PR kind of stunt. FHD would never advocate or allow this kind of money to be allocated out for things like that. And so the idea, honestly, a year ago for me was the giant fear that they were not going to sell, they were not going to change on this sell to buy kind of policy, and there wasn't going to be investment to come in after losing Salah, Van Dijk, and Trent, maybe walking out on a free. Like that was the theory, that was the thinking or fear a year ago, at least that I had. Maybe other Liverpool fans as well. And just a year around later, I can't believe that they've turned around and brought in Isak, brought in Ekatike, brought in Florian Wirtz, and then brought in two pretty exciting fullbacks as well. And so and they did bring in this 18-year-old Leone, who again he does look promising. So the kind of profiles that they've done is interesting, and there is a lot of ability for this squad to maybe age out as well, with maybe the replacements already in mind. Now they've spent something like 300 or 400 quid without factoring what they've done in player sales as well, which I think over the total it's probably like 280, which is again I can't remember Liverpool doing that kind of business. But they did do some selling as well, but it looks like they're going to continue, especially when it looks like they've got plans in place for someone like Mark Gahey. Now they did lose some players as well. They've lost Harvey Elliott. I think it's only on loan, but it's probably going to be a loan to buy policy. They've lost someone like a Tyler Morton. I already mentioned Diaz and Darwin Nunez. Uh, and they've lost Joel Kwanzaa. So they have done some sales to kind of continue with this, but and maybe they are a little bit front loaded where they're or attack heavy where a couple injuries maybe in midfield could lead them a little scant. There are a lot of kids in place, but man, this is starting to be really, really exciting. And you look at what could possibly be a lineup when Salah does leave for African Cup of Nations this February or January. You could possibly have a Florian Wirtz in the middle with Ekatike and Isak as kind of a front two, with a couple midfields with a midfield behind, and then the fullbacks to create out wide. I mean, you can maybe say that Liverpool are maybe equipped to handle, something like that in a way they just haven't in the past. Now, again, every squad's going to be vulnerable to any kind of injury issues. And speaking of, Arsenal kind of are experiencing that now. No Saka for this game. No Odegaard. Or Odegaard wasn't fit to start. No Havertz, and I really think Havertz ended up maybe hurting at least in this game because you're starting to see Victor Gyökeres. Uh, he is a player that Arsenal have not had in a long time, or at least maybe ever under Arteta, except maybe Aubameyang or Lacazette towards the end of his time there. Gyökeres really is. He wants the ball on the run. He wants to square up with center backs. He wants to be physical with them. He isn't necessarily, dropping in and doing necessarily the link up play that say maybe a Havertz would offer, but at the same time, he's also trying to get forward. He wants the ball on the run more, and Arsenal don't always necessarily play that way. And I think at least in the beginning of this stretch, uh, you're starting to see that struggle just a little bit. Just Arsenal players aren't necessarily recognizing when to maybe play him in. He didn't have a ton of touches in this game, but also in this game, they didn't. Arsenal did not have a ton of creative options. We'll get to the starting lineup with no Odegaard in there. You figured someone like Ebericha Eze had to have started, and instead he comes off on in the second half. Maybe you understand that the idea maybe to clog things in midfield, get to the second half, and try to change the game that way. But I would argue Arteta waited too long to do that because one of the things that Eze does almost immediately is he gets by Szoboszlai. He's able to go past Kanate, and it creates a chance where Allison has to run to get to the ball. Uh, but the other thing I think Arteta really messed up on is he plays Mikel Merino in a midfield three. I think this was a case where you could have tried to play Miles Lewis Skelly. Now, uh, I'm not going to say that Lewis Skelly should have played instead of Calafiori because Calafiori did a job on Salah, but at the same time, the way that Liverpool were able to beat Arsenal and really kind of stretch them is they were able to use Szoboszlai to get him as wide as possible to hug that touchline, and that would just drag Mikel Merino over, and he was never quick enough to be able to get there. Calafiori was not able to help out either because he always had to deal with Salah. So Liverpool were able to kind of exploit that. And I'm thinking in a way, someone like a Lewis Skelly would have been able to rotate and get there, arrive a little quicker. Maybe it necessarily wouldn't have worked out. Maybe, Szoboszlai would have been able to bully Lewis Skelly instead. But I just think maybe Arteta messed up a little bit there. But perhaps that would be a little too cute. You could argue, maybe just play Zubamendi, Rice, and someone like an Eze, kind of like as a 10. But maybe Arteta didn't want to run with something that maybe would be a little too attack minded. I don't know. As they only arrived, maybe he doesn't have the whole idea of how Arsenal play out of possession. The other thing too is you could have just started him on the left instead of Gabriel Martinelli, who really did struggle. And again, two games in a row where Szoboszlai has had relatively easy tasks to handle someone like a Harvey Barnes, who's only uh, I don't say limited, but the defenders that study them know exactly what someone like a Barnes is going to do versus say an Anthony Gordon, and likewise Martinelli now has kind of come into that little mold a little bit where he wants to get the ball onto his right foot as much as possible. He's not going to necessarily try to go to the byline to get something off with his left, and that hurts Jekarish as well because he's not able to get any kind of crossing from that side. Uh, but the other thing too is Martinelli is kind of it seems like he's isolated. He's never really gonna have a whole lot of help, a whole lot especially with no one someone like Marino is not gonna be able to offer any kind of overlap help. Calafiori was hesitant to do that because again, Liverpool always had Salah back there. So that's just kind of where Arsenal was, and then with Liverpool, we have Szoboszlai, Konate, Virgil, Kirkes, Gravenberch, Alexis, and then Wirtz, Salah, Ekitike, and then Gakpo. So no real surprise there. It's kind of the lineup that we saw versus Newcastle. The interesting thing, though, to me, is Alexis McAllister. He is the one that was, I think his wife just had a baby, or he just had a baby with his wife. Wasn't able to play versus Newcastle. Back in the starting 11 here, and the only thing you can say is maybe he was a little bit bullied a little bit by Arsenal's kind of three-man midfield, at least in that first half. It seemed like he was really struggling there. But Liverpool were struggling as well. And I'll spend a little time getting to that as well. And then with Arsenal, we have Timber, Saliba, Gabriel Calafiori, Zubamendi, Rice, Marino, kind of like I talked about, and Madueke, Jokeres, and then Martinelli. And so you see a little bit of the problem. There's not really a whole lot of creation in the middle. Uh, Timber and Calafiori aren't really able to really help out going forward either. So you're limited a little bit with that front three, essentially. And kind of the main thing that was happening a lot, at least in the first half, was Jokeres or Madueke or even Martinelli were getting into pretty good spots. And the issue would be there would never be any kind of additional help. There would never be anyone trying to get into the attack, making a box crashing run. Other maybe Rice a couple of times, but it wasn't Marino, and obviously it's not going to be Zubamendi and Calafiori and Timber weren't really able to do that a whole lot either. So Arsenal were limited when they went forward. The other thing as well is Saliba picks up an injury early on as well. So Arsenal were already without a couple players, and then they lose Saliba. But they have recruited well in this respect. Could they just have someone like a Christian Mosquera to come in and maybe had a little shaky moments, a little bit on the ball, in my opinion, in the first half. But for the most part, did play all right. And Arsenal didn't miss Saliba necessarily that much. Now, maybe if I went back and really studied it, because I didn't really look at the first half nearly as well because Liverpool didn't really play that well. But I did watch a lot of the second half, and I thought maybe Ekitike did a little bit better a job of trying to make Mosquera kind of follow him a little bit more out wide. But for the most part, Liverpool did not really sniff a chance, at least in that first half. And Mosquera did not really let Ekitike get the ball and turn and do the things that he wanted to do. Arsenal had Liverpool in the first half. So again, Liverpool can't win the ball back. Arsenal are playing in triangles, but they're rarely going forwards with it. So again, you have, uh, and the issue is once they were able to get people, free, it would only be out wide. And Martinelli and Madueke were not able to take on Kirkes and Szoboszlai and beat them. If again, Kirkes had Madueke's number, and then Martinelli also couldn't really shake either Dominic Szoboszlai or Kanate when Kanate was coming to recovery help either. But we did have a couple moments where they had breakaways. But again, you rarely see Arsenal's midfielders making late runs to offer support. So the cutback ball wasn't on, so attacks would stall, and then they recycle again. Now, a lot of this would be fine for Arsenal because they're controlling the game. They're taking out. They're handling the Anfield noise. They're making it quiet because Liverpool can't get really near them. But again, a lot of this was just keep ball. Now, if Arsenal had the lead, especially in the second half, this would be a brilliant way to play. But they didn't. Uh, and then we do get to a couple of, the other thing as well is it got to a point where Arsenal just straight did not really want to go forward, and they actually played themselves into some danger by this. Liverpool's really only moments came from. So there was a back pass to Raya. So Raya has to deal with a really well, there's a back pass to Raya that Salah nearly gets on the end of. I think it's Madueke who just gets the ball and instead of trying to go forward, he just boots it backwards, and it's a very strange kind of play. And Salah nearly gets there as well, and then Raya had they're trying to pass in the back. Raya has a terrible pass in the middle of the field that Van Dijk's able to intercept, and that nearly led to something. Uh, but that was really it. Liverpool were not able to possess the ball nearly enough. They weren't able, and because of that, because it wasn't really settled kind of game, you weren't able to get McAllister involved. You weren't able to really get Wirtz involved, and it felt like the few times they were able to get on the ball, they were mistiming their passes or misplaying them. And again, I thought Ugo Atakite was trying to be an option in midfield, but to me, that was just kind of congesting things. You needed to have a striker to make runs off the shoulder to push people back. Gakpo wasn't really offering that, and Salah wasn't really offering that either, especially not versus Calafiori. So Liverpool did not really have a way to advance the ball, and just there was a lot of this game that was played in the middle third, to be honest. So again, Arteta probably had to love where this was going. Though we get to the second half and things change. So Liverpool's press seems to change. Salah starts to run to press Gabriel, who doesn't seem comfortable on the ball. It seemed like that was really the pressing trigger. Szoboszlai plays higher up and starts to mark Calafiori. Now Kanate shifts over to handle Martinelli. Van Dijk has Gyökeres. And Liverpool seemed to do a better job of speeding Arsenal up. Now this can make it a little more vulnerable, but it seemed like that you're inviting Arsenal to try to go forward more when they didn't want to, and Arsenal start to turn the ball away because of this. And then again, there are a number of times that Van Dijk is able to be aggressive, and he wins the ball back by following Gyökeres, and he gets there before Gyökeres can receive the ball and turn on him. It felt to me Arsenal were playing deeper, we're starting to play a little bit deeper. And to me, I thought the gamble started to pay off a little bit for Liverpool. And then in settled possession, things change as well. So they start to make better decisions on the ball. But two, Allison to me is more patient. He's not just booting things away when anyone gets kind of near him. He's taking his time for someone to fully commit to him. And then Gravenberch is starting to take more risk as well. He's starting to run towards the ball to be a bit of a kind of like a wall pass or kind of a shield to play things off. Where before that option wasn't really available. Gravenberch is able to do this because he's able to get away from Rice and Zubimendi, who had other jobs, trying to mark with Wirtz and McAllister. So they're starting to take more risk here. Kanate starts to go wide. Van Dijk goes a little bit wider as well, and Gravenberch kind of drops into the center to almost be kind of a center back on the ball and a makeshift back three. What this does is it leads to other changes as well. So because of this, we start to see more Florian Wirtz on the ball, But why is that? We start to see Szoboszlai starting to take up different positions, and this is where I mentioned how he's maybe Trent-like. Arsenal start to lose the game in this respect because Martinelli is starting to mark Konate, and Konate always has Szoboszlai for an easy ball. And again, Calafiori can't do much to help out because he's worried about Salah all the time. Marino was supposed to be Dominic Szoboszlai's guy, and he can't stay with him. And again, because if he goes to mark him out wide, that just opened up the midfield where Zubimendi and Rice were not able, that's a lot of ground to cover in the middle. We're not able to keep hold of Wirtz and McAllister. All of a sudden, Liverpool started to find those passes. And the other thing you start to see is more central progression. Liverpool aren't just trying to advance the ball out wide because that was the only outlets. They're starting to use the width to open up the middle in a sense, and they're threading some dangerous balls through, and they're able to find these gaps. And this basically you see this actually later on for the goal or the free kick that leads to the goal. So a couple of these moments I want to highlight here. One of the very first real moments Liverpool were able to get an attack. Szoboszlai finds himself making a run, through the middle. Van Dijk has a very clever line splitting pass to find him. So I mentioned how once you're able to get Mourinho to move away, that opens up Arsenal a little bit more. And Gravenberch starts to play these passes through the middle, but also Van Dijk. And Liverpool basically changed this entire second half on Van Dijk's kind of ability to play through lines. Essentially, it's a you start to see this over and over again. So here's Van Dijk with a line splitting pass that finds Szoboszlai. He plays it out wide to Gakpo, who finds Salah. Salah takes a touch, or maybe the shot is blocked. That possibly could have been the first goal. They finally were able to get Salah the ball in the box. But we start to see this more and more. We also start to see Liverpool use the wings a little bit more. They start to find Salah more. There's a Van Dijk a diagonal that immediately finds Salah. There's a Szoboszlai diagonal that finds Gakpo. We also start to see Wirtz get way more involved and higher upfield. Wirtz then finds Salah, who again on a different day probably does a little bit better here, but again has a nice touch, or maybe takes too much of a touch, and then it goes the chance. But Wirtz starts to get way more of the ball, way more involved. He starts to be part of some of those second balls, some of those duels in midfield. Arsenal lose control of the game, and the game kind of becomes a little bit more of kind of a kickball, a transition based, or more of a more second ball, bouncing kind of based. And Wirtz is starting to show he can handle some of these physical contests, and also you see just how quickly his mind works at getting rid of the ball and finding feet. Wirtz came to life more in the second half, so that helped things as well. So Liverpool were able to unsettle Arsenal in possession, unable to actually play through Arsenal when Liverpool had the ball, and also when things were kind of 50-50, Liverpool were starting to win those 50-50 duels when they weren't in the second half as well. Uh, and then a couple other moments to highlight. This is another one where it almost seemed like Liverpool scored here. So Gakpo gets the ball, has Kirkes overlapping him. Finally, get Kirkes more involved. Gakpo cuts inside, finds McAllister, and McAllister finally has one of his kind of marquee moments where he fakes shooting and does a very clever pass into Wirtz. So he disguises it. Wirtz takes a touch, then has a great save or a great shot. That's saved by Raya, but only a little bit. He can only parry it. Gakpo is there to basically win the loose ball, and Ekitike basically bowls over it into the net, but Gakpo is offsides. But finally, Liverpool is starting to move the ball quicker. Arsenal will look kind of sixes and sevens here. And then we see another change. We see Slot take McAllister off, who really wasn't having the best game, outside of that moment. And then Curtis Jones comes on, and to be fair, Curtis Jones also offered some kind of needed energy and physicality that was maybe missing in that first half. And again, we start to see it's light and day with the duel winning and the second balls, and Liverpool are starting to not lose these battles to Arsenal. But the other thing too is we're starting to see Wirtz and Jones now are starting to drag Rice and Zubimendi apart. And again, Arsenal are trying to because Marino is being stuck outside to mark with Szoboszlai. Rice and Zubimendi have Wirtz and have Jones, and they're basically making these runs, and they're they're running away. It seemed like Arsenal were trying to man mark a little bit. All this was doing was opening more gaps for Van Dijk to find people on the ball without being pressed. And Van Dijk was able to find the open man. There's also a moment where Gravenberch does something similar. Gravenberch gets on the ball, nearly plays a great pass into Ekitike, making a run in behind, and it's just hit a little bit too hard. Otherwise, he would have been in on goal as well. So, Liverpool started to see these spaces to play these balls in between lines through Arsenal's shape in a way they hadn't previously. We saw a little of some of this for Bournemouth, in my opinion, as well. Now, again, it didn't always lead to chances, but I'm very excited to at least kind of see that, especially considering how bad the first half was. But the way that they were able to just every single possession really in the second half, at least after the 55th minute, Liverpool were able to just find Arsenal out, and Arsenal had really had no idea what to do. I also thought Ekitike is doing a much better job to stay higher up with those center backs, so the center backs can't really help out like they were able to maybe in the first half, and because of that, because Ekitike is being higher up now, he's not always being involved like he would maybe want to. Maybe he's using it as a decoy. That to me is the reason why Verts had more freedom to get the ball and to play make a little bit as well. And so, someone like an Isak coming in is going to play like that too. And so this does get way more exciting with Isak coming in. And the only question is how does Ekitike fit into the squad? Does he take Gakpo's place instead? Are they able to play with two? It's not going to change the shape to maybe a two man attack instead of a one. We don't really know. If nothing else, he's got options now, and you don't want to necessarily say Liverpool needed options, but it does kind of help because some of these cases, you saw versus Newcastle, you saw it actually a little bit for Bournemouth as well, or at least you saw it versus Crystal Palace. That really was the one to highlight where Liverpool did kind of get into a point where if a team's really settled in against them, it can be a little bit hard. Salah maybe isn't able to to take everyone on 1v1 and just beat everyone at a time. Gakpo is not necessarily that kind of striker either. He likes getting a shot off for himself or make runs to the back post. He they don't really have necessarily the most kind of clever creative kind of player in between those spaces always. Now that's where Verts is supposed to come in. We hadn't necessarily seen that until basically here, but the main thing as well is if Ekatike, who hasn't necessarily been able to play a full 90, if he had to go off, the only option after him was someone like a Chiesa, and we saw that again in this game as well. And so Liverpool needed to bring someone in. It didn't necessarily have to be a 25 or whatever it is goal scorer in Alexander Isak. I would have been okay with honestly Johan Riza. Now him being away for African Cup of Nations would have sucked, but they needed to do something with the loss of Diego Jota and selling Nunez as well. They did the only other striker would have been Jaden Dance on the actual team sheet. So they needed to bring someone in, and not only did they bring someone in, they brought in someone that really is going to change how they play and how teams are going to be able to mark Liverpool as well. And in my opinion, this is going to unlock Salah as you're not because Salah you started to see it a little bit towards the end of the season last year as well. He's less a goal scorer. He'll always be a threat in the box, but he likes to create for others now. He starts to kind of run a little bit more towards the ball than not. I mean, in the second half, he was doing a better job to be an option ahead, and the ball over the top was finding him, and he was able to give Calafiori some fits. One of the I didn't really talk about all the chances, but there was a couple of times where Salah was getting in some pretty good 1v1s and was actually being a little bit threatening in the box where Arsenal needed some desperate defending on him. Salah did come to life a little bit more in the second half because of that. But in the first half, Salah really was trying to run to the ball, and like maybe Calafiori kind of follows him. But when he does that, he needs options ahead of him for his kind of playmaking to work. Otherwise, he's just going to pass it backwards. So that kind of defeats the purpose. Someone like a Ekitike, in my opinion, was kind of doing the same. He would always be kind of next to him. There would never be anyone further ahead. And if you don't have a striker ahead, that allows Arsenal's back line to just creep all the way up, where they have the kind of pace to do those kind of sprints. So Liverpool were not really able to get behind in that first half in a way they were in the second half. So better by Ekitike, but at the same time, Isak, that's never really going to be an issue as well. And the other thing too is he's like 6'3", 6'4". I mean, Isak's tall as well, but Isak is very, very good in the air. And the teams that try to play in a box and in a shell, Salah is very good at playmaking. I think if teams are going to, you're not going to be able to double team Salah and Isak essentially. So it frees both of them up to really. It's going to lead to way more goals, is what I'll say. Now, maybe teams will be able to get some counters on the back end. A little, maybe it could be a little bit short when it comes to defending transitions. That's been a little bit of an issue as well. Injuries at the back could possibly change things as well. But it's hard not to really hype this team up at least going forward. Uh, but we'll get to like the end of this game where it does end 1-0, and it's simply because eventually there's one of these passes to Curtis Jones where again I think it's Szoboszlai tries to do a ball first, that's kind of blocked. Uh, the ball finds Van Dyke, but uh, again you're not able to get any kind of pressure on him. And he does another kind of just pass that just plays through the lines, and it just one ball splits, goes past Declan Rice, it goes past Zubimendi, and Curtis Jones is able to find it, and he's able to run into goal or run towards goal, and Zubimendi fouls him from behind, and then 30 plus yards out, worldy with Raya stretch, it is perfect placement and knuckles in by Szoboszlai. Now the interesting thing is Raya's positioning is a little bit off, and the reason why is he's trying to have eyes on the ball, the whole time. But I noticed this in the United game, a couple of the day before when Bayern was trying to deal with a Burnley free kick. Now it's not necessarily the same thing, but I forget who even took it for Burnley, but he was trying to go for goal as well. He was never doing this. He didn't have an issue just standing up and seeing from over the wall. And I am wondering if Raya being 6 foot or whatever size he is, it maybe does hurt him a little bit here. I remember there was a Bruno free kick as well that gave Raya kind of fits because he has to move. He has to position himself in the goal just to see the ball at all times, and then he's able to kind of reposition himself. But that said, even if he's in the right position, I don't know if he's saving this. So there's that as well, and it's just it really is a worldie. And then Odegaard came on, Eze came on, and Eze to me did pose more of a threat than Martinelli, but it was just kind of too little, too late. The other thing too is Kanate does get injured a little bit, or maybe cramped. So Joe Gomez has to play the final 10 minutes, and at that point, Eze was able. That's when Eze really was starting able to be a little bit more dangerous as well. You could say maybe Martinelli would have been able to go with Joe Gomez a little bit as well. Joe Gomez got the wrong side of him, and it looked like that maybe was Arsenal's chance. Where Eze, I don't know how he didn't get a shot off at Allison, and instead he tried to basically dive for a PK. Didn't necessarily take Allison on because that really was the moment there. So we look at the stats. Liverpool 53% to 47. Not high XG, only 9 shots and 3 on target. Arsenal with 11-1, but of the 9 that Liverpool had, 7 came in the second half. So that kind of says a little bit as well. Again, kind of low passing for both teams as well. So I mentioned how no one really deserved to win that game, but this is a big one. Uh, at Anfield, you don't want to necessarily drop points there. Arsenal, there was all this talk about maybe this is going to be their year. They need to have this kind of win, and they haven't necessarily been able to do that yet. But also, if you're an Arsenal fan, you have to maybe look at Arteta just kind of going into this where it seemed like the idea was to scrape some like kind of a 1-1 or 1-0 kind of win. Maybe you get something on a set piece. Coming in, Liverpool were not really great in the air versus Newcastle. And so you kind of feared a little bit about that with Arsenal being so good in the air as well. Now maybe the injury to Saliba actually did show up there. Liverpool were able to defend the set pieces very, very well, though. But again, you have someone like that really is the best back-to-back games that we've seen from Van Dijk in a long time. You saw Van Dijk able to beat Dan Burn on Newcastle, in the air when he needed to, and then in this game, you saw not just his ability to be defensively. I mean, Jokeric didn't really sniff anything. You saw Van Dijk unbelievably good with the ball at his feet, and without that, I don't think Liverpool even get that free kick for Szoboszlai to have that amazing goal in the first place. So, I kind of the real takeaways to me are, you know, already mentioned Szoboszlai. I think, going, it helps that Frimpong is hurt, but even with Connor Bradley, it's hard to not say, you can just slot in, him in the Trent role and not really much changes. Now, that's not necessarily gonna help Salah because, the idea was maybe having an overlap for Salah to play with, but that maybe does expose you a little bit more defensively. I don't really know. I really liked what I saw, and it's not necessarily like, as Szoboszlai was more involved in that second half, it's not like Salah wasn't as well. So that was kind of the thing to talk about, and the also thing, and he had a what a week he had because he also had the step over or the dummy that helped with the youngster in Rio Nigamoura's uh, a game winner for versus Newcastle. So just an unbelievable kind of week for Dom. The other thing too is, the ironic thing a little bit was after Florian Wirtz was announced, and it was just kind of accepted that he was gonna take Dominic Szoboszlai's spot in that 10 role, where a lot of fans, when they were doing their 11s to start the season, didn't have Szoboszlai in the team, and, Gravenberch wasn't able to play versus Crystal Palace, so Szoboszlai obviously kind of slots in there, plays in the DM spot, didn't do bad, but it's not necessarily his possession, and now he just offers you anything you want. I don't see how you leave him out. Even if it's McAllister, who I love, I just don't think if you want to play him, like, a little bit out on the other side of midfield too. If you want to play him instead of Wirtz, you can do that. If you want to fit him in right back, you should do that. I just don't see how you leave him out if he's fit. Uh, and that really is the main kind of takeaway for me, and also the slight solid drop off, not making those runs forward that needed to come from elsewhere, and that's why again, Isak's gonna offer that all the time. So I do think we could possibly see a little slight change where Isak maybe becomes the outlet, not necessarily Salah, but we'll see how that works. I really am excited to see this, if nothing else, obviously, to say that. So, and what are they getting with Isak? So it is a 1v1 finishing demon. He's got ways to receive the ball. So it's not like his link of play is bad either. He's got pace to running behind. To me, he's a very good ball carrier, especially you get him into the box. He's going to draw some PKs, and he's elite finisher and 6'4", good in the air as well. He's a handful. The only thing you can say is sometimes the way his body is maybe it's a little bit too much on the ligaments, on the tendons, because he does have a lot of soft tissue issues. But you look at his injury record, he mostly misses like 10 or so games throughout the season. That's not the end of the world if you're gonna still have 20 league goals or whatever it is. He nearly scores a goal a game the way that Erling Haaland does. Now he didn't have the best run of it towards the end of the season for Newcastle last season. But looking forward, maybe he was playing hurt. I don't really know. He really is exciting, and at least nothing is guaranteed. You can't say that. So at least in this respect, you've done what you're supposed to do. If it doesn't work out, it is what it is. But it's not like they're playing. It's not like they're bringing in a project. This is someone that is quite proven, and he's only 24 or 25. So the profile is there for a long term, and I think they did sign him for 6 years. So this is going to be really exciting. It's going to be really exciting to also see Wirtz. I think it's going to open Salah up. I think it's going to open Wirtz up with someone like Isak. And the only thing that it's not necessarily a negative, but Ekitike has done nothing wrong to start this season. And if Gakpo had been on sides, it would have been 3 for 3 as far as goals go, or even 4 for 4 because he scored for Crystal Palace as well. And it's just you do feel with Isak coming in, maybe Ekitike does do a little bit more kind of roles, second half roles on the bench, or maybe he plays out wide. Maybe Gakpo is the one that ends up getting kind of hurt by this. Either way, Slot now has options in a way that he didn't necessarily have before. So that's kind of the run up for Liverpool. We'll get to Arsenal. Already did spend a little time here, see how we're doing for time. and we got a little time here. They weren't full strength. It is worth saying that. No, losing Saliba, Saka, Odegaard. Most Arsenal fans would have seen that, and they would have feared for the worst. They didn't. They didn't. Do anything to necessarily sell themselves. But at the same time, this game was there for them, and the three midfielders that Arteta picked, they weren't going to offer you something going forward. They weren't going to be goal threats or anything. You had Eza that was good off the bench, but maybe he could have come on earlier. I thought Madueke was getting into good areas and just couldn't beat Kirkez. Uh, so there's something is to say is that as well. But the other note I had was Jokeresh, and it just felt he couldn't really get himself open in the box. And the other thing I was surprised by was him not having like 45 touches because the way that Liverpool were doing basically man marking is you would have thought Jokeresh would have just dragged Virgil van Dijk to just run with him wherever and anywhere. That's what Havertz would have done. And instead, he only had maybe 20 or so, where someone like a Havertz really would have had touches everywhere, where you wouldn't have been able to play the way that Liverpool were, man tight, at least in that second half. And that's kind of the criticism that the funny thing is that is kind of the criticism that I was given with Ekatike because he was kind of doing that as well. But the other thing is it's fine when you have someone doing that when you always have outlets ahead. And Madueke was looking to get the ball ahead, and that is what Martinelli does as well. Uh, so I just thought it was too easy where he was trying to live in midfield, or he wasn't able to escape there. And then the other thing too is you never really if you have your striker to dropping in, you need to have one of those 3 DM options to go forward to make the numbers kind of change a little bit. And it just felt like Arsenal didn't necessarily have that. They didn't have ways to make Liverpool kind of question, who is marking who, those kind of things. So I do think Gyökeres can maybe offer a little bit more of that. He can be, or is he just kind of a final third player? Either way, it's not the end of the world because you get Odegaard back, you get Eza back. He's going to be there. Those players are going to be able to find pockets to turn and find ways to get Gyökeres more involved. There was a moment where he did have a touch to Odegaard, and Odegaard tried to lay it up back off to him instead of going for a shot. So you have seen a little of that. And the other thing to talk about is Miles Lewis Skelly maybe would have had a chance to come in and do more than what Mikel Merino did, because I thought Liverpool exploited in that second half with Mikel Merino not being able to stick with Szoboszlai. Maybe Lewis Skelly would have done a little bit more. The other thing too is Calafiore does this great job on Salah, but they just brought in Pierre Hincapie of Bayer Leverkusen, who plays that same kind of position and maybe is more threatening, going forward than Calafiore. So it's interesting there. Either way, Arsenal have definitely looked in the transfer market, and they brought in a striker that they didn't have before, and I do think he's going to lead to goals in bunches. He just Arsenal Arsenal have so much of the ball in all these games. Usually, maybe they aren't the most creative, but at the same time, he's pretty good at getting on the end of reaction shots. Uh, Eventually, they'll also figure out a way to play him in behind. I don't think that'll take too long for that. You have there's no Saka, but you have a way where Madueke is not the worst kind of replacement in that kind of sense. Also, someone like an Eze can immediately come in and probably do a little bit more than necessarily Martinelli, and Eze doesn't necessarily need an overlapper, though that's not necessarily going to hurt him. But he's going to be a threat when he gets the ball kind of near the box. He's got a really good shot on him, and that's going to force defenders to think twice about him as well. So there's a lot of ways for this to still be positive for Arsenal fans. They have depth in a way they didn't have last year, where if they lost Saka to some kind of hamstring, they would have been hamstrung. And I don't necessarily think that is the case. They lose Saliba in this game. Here in comes Mosquera, and it wasn't really an issue. If something happens to Gabriel Martinelli, you can probably play Calafiore at center back instead, and then you have Pierre Hincapie in that kind of case. You maybe have Miles Lewis Skelly to play in midfield if something happens, to one of those players in midfield. So Arsenal have depth now. You're gonna get Kai Havertz back soon. You're gonna get Gabriel Jesus back. Apparently, he's still part of the team too. So this in a weird way, it's hard because Liverpool have have won the league, and then they just had the basically a record kind of signing, spending spree for them. Even though Arsenal did, net spend a little bit more, it's going to be hard to say that this isn't going to be the first time where Arteta is going to be under pressure to deliver a little bit more because they've done a lot of this on his say so. The ownership has spent a whole lot. They have backed him, and now Arteta has solutions, or at least he has players to help him out in these games where sometimes his football doesn't always lead to the best kind of outcome. They have it's not necessarily they've been very good versus the quote unquote the big six. That's one thing that Arsenal fans like talking about. But to me, the issue is more kind of over the years the games versus like a West Ham that have given them fits, or Fulham, or even in Everton. Teams that really do kind of pack it in and make it hard for them to necessarily create. They do have more creation now, and it just depends if Arteta is going to allow for them to play with freedom. Now, if so, Arsenal are probably going to be there. There's no reason to think they won't be, but that's things probably do need to change here, and you're not gonna knock off the title winners or the title holders by playing safe. I think Arsenal fans kind of know that. I think Arteta even knows that as well. Though it does feel until it's one thing to say it. Actions speak a little bit more than necessarily words, and the actions were have been hesitant. So we'll see if maybe they're able to change a little bit more going forward or not. And so that's kind of just where we are there. And then I'll move on to Man City and Brighton. And one of my kind of early takeaways from week one was Man City maybe are back, and that really hasn't worked out. Uh, so we'll kind of get to that a little bit. The City were more than fine in that first half. It felt like Erling Haaland could have easily had a hat trick. Brighton were able to get in behind and able to cause some fits, but at least as far as making the goalkeeper work, James Trafford, I think he only had one shot. I think Brighton only had one shot total in that first half, and at least it did force a save. But for the most part, City were all over them, and then the second half things entirely flipped. And so we'll get a little bit to that in this game. We see Rodri back, but that's maybe not enough to necessarily solve this. I do think one of the things to say is this Man City side doesn't have a traditional right back. And in this game, we finally see Mateus Nunes come in. He did okay, but it's maybe not necessarily enough. But at the same time, well, I guess one thing you can say is he gets he gets kind of penalized for a handball, and that's what basically gets Brighton back into the game. It's a little bit harsh, and maybe that's the reason why Pep kind of took him off. But Pep brings on Rico Lewis, and Rico Lewis ends up kind of contributing a little bit to the game winning goal for Brighton. But I think you're starting to see at least in that second half here where City are just a little bit uh, um, imbalanced. Would probably be the best way to put it. So you don't have a traditional right back. Mateus Nunes really is a midfielder or kind of a winger. Which maybe is fine kind of going forward, but defensively, a bit of an issue. Also, uh, maybe he's not the best kind of midfielder. It's not really the best passer. Well, we'll put it that way. He's a really good ball carrier, and the problem is when you're right back, that doesn't always kind of help out. And what we saw in this game was him kind of giving the ball away a lot. So that's probably the reason why Pep really did hook him. But you also saw Oscar Bob really not helping out at all here. And City's shape, we'll kind of get to this a little bit as well. City's shape was weird. It was very, very narrow. And so you had Marmoush, Holland, and Oscar Bob, almost like a very narrow kind of front three. And so it was very easy for Brighton to exploit the wide areas. And so they were doing that with no issues, really. And once you're able to do that, then you've got Matoma on the wing, you've got a Minta, Yakoba Minta on the wing as well. And so if you're going to allow Brighton to just kind of easily build out, and that's what City were doing. The ball in behind was always kind of on, essentially. And first half they were getting close, but it wasn't always coming off. The second half that changed. The other thing that happened more in the second half was really, Brighton just unleashed Yakuba Minta, and City had no solutions. They started to use Ait Nori to try to get a little bit more forward. Ait Nori maybe loose the ball, and then immediately Minta already is in front of him, and Ait Nori is not going to be able to catch him either. And just it felt like anytime they were able to free Minta in, he was kind of getting in behind. And there are a couple of moments in that second half where someone like a Kushyanov had to make recovery challenges just to kind of prevent maybe an one-on-one situation with the keeper. And Kushyanov was doing just enough. Actually, for the most part, he was having a pretty good game, and then he gets a little too overly aggressive, and he goes to ground, and he fouls one of the players. It might have even been Menta as well. That leads to the free kick, and on the free kick, there's a handball, and that leads to the PK, and then James Milner scores on the PK. But after that, it felt like Brighton were just going to do even more than necessarily City getting back in. Erling Haaland was so threatening in that first half, and then it felt like they never really were able to find him in the second half. To me, the other thing too is someone like a Marmoush was played, next to Haaland, and Marmoush, has a bit of a heavy touch, a heavy kind of dribble in the box, and that leads to City's first goal. But for the most part, I thought Marmoush wasn't really the best to kind of hook up with Erling Haaland either, and I thought his first touch and decision making was kind of hurting a little bit as well. So that wasn't really fitting. Uh, we speak about Oscar Bob. Oscar Bob was getting into pretty good situations where someone like a Brian Mahrez instead, just to kind of a past City kind of team, probably would have led to a goal or probably would have led to creating something for Erling Haaland. Instead, Oscar Bob was getting either the final pass or the final kind of cross completely off. Sometimes crossing it out of bounds. Oscar Bob was not doing a good job to stay wide and to hold with. Oscar Bob was not doing a good job out of possession, where Brighton were able to get people forward. De Kuyper was going forward, and now if you're Mateus Nunes, you got to deal with Minta, or you got to deal with Matoma, and you got to deal with De Kuyper out wide on you. Or sometimes, Danny Welbeck doesn't is a very kind of strange striker because he doesn't really, I guess he is kind of a false nine as well, but he doesn't necessarily try to drop into midfield as much as he runs into channels. And so whether or not it's one side, if Welbeck wants to run outside to offer an overload with Jacobo Minta on the right side, or if he wants to go to the left side, City just did not have a way to kind of free up with Danny Welbeck as well, and that was kind of happening a little bit here. So Rodri alone isn't going to fix this. City we're having lots of issues, and the other thing too is uh, Fabio and Hurtzler on Brighton made some changes, and I think he made like 4 different subs, and that once that happened, that really did change, the outlook for Brighton too, and so as the game went on, it felt like only Brighton were going to win, and that basically is what happened with a wonderful goal by Gruda, to say as well. So we get to the starting 11, and it's Mateus Nunes, John Stones, Kushinov, and Ait Nouri. Kushinov, to me, probably does have to play. Now, Pep's not gonna like that he, was responsible a little bit for the for the foul that led to the PK. But John Stones can't necessarily play in a high line. Neither can Ruben Diaz, and we spoke about that for Spurs as well. So I wasn't surprised to see him back into the 11. I've been surprised that for the most part Pep's kept him out, though I don't really think he's had necessarily a whole lot of bad performances. And then you have Ait Nouri and Mateus Nunes. So you saw Pep kind of changing it up a little bit here. But here's where it really messes up on. So he's got Rodri, and then he's got Bernardo Silva, and then Reinders. Bernardo Silva can't do the help that he needs to, and you've got Oscar Bob Holland and Omar Marmoush playing very narrow, and then Bernardo Silva and Reinders are kind of narrow as well. So you can just look at least the way it's presented here. The out wide areas are very, very exploitable, where Bernardo Silva is not going to be able to get out there to help out. Mateus Nunes was outnumbered all the time, really, because Oscar Bob isn't helping and Bernardo Silva is not able to help out either. Marmoush was not really helping out on the other side either. Reinders was trying to, but at least you had Kushinoff. But again, Rodri can't Superman the entire field like maybe in the past. So it was Pep maybe screwed up a little bit of a play by Bernardo Silva's, but really the issue was just City being very, very narrow. And maybe this has worked in the past because for the longest time, I remember, City there was a City and Arsenal game where Pep did something similar, Arteta did something similar, where a lot of these big teams at one point wanted to uh, wanted to suffocate the center to make you go out wide because you go out wide that's not really any kind of danger, and it seems like Pep or this City team were not ready to play a Brighton team that had no issues advance the ball out wide to create problems. To start out wide to go back to the center as well. Um, but it took a while for that to happen. So again, Veltman, Van Hecke, Dunk to Kuiper, Baliba, Hinselwood. So Baliba continues to have a different kind of midfield partner. And Baliba, they said Baliba is kind of struggling a little bit with his knees. Maybe that's the reason why he keeps getting hooked a little bit. And then Diego Gomez was kind of interesting as well. He's more of kind of a central midfielder, not necessarily number 10, but he started to get forward. And so that's kind of what I'm mentioning. When you have a striker that's going to play not necessarily ahead of the ball at all times, but maybe someone that's going to roam, you need someone to eventually make a run from deep to surprise. Gomez was doing that, and that's the person that ends up nearly getting him behind on Kushnev. Otherwise, Brighton would have been in even before the goal that they scored. So Gomez was offering that, and then you have Menta, Welbeck, and Matoma as the front line. So, already talked a little bit about kind of the recap here. Uh, it, City City did get going after like 25 minutes, so don't want to necessarily speak about everything that happened, but we'll give it a go. So again, Holland could have had a hat trick. So he played in behind the Brighton back line. Holland scuffs the finish. There's a cross into the box. Holland header from close, saved by for Bregan. It's a pretty good save there. And then he does find the net because of Marmoush having a bit of a heavy touch that Holland's able to put away. Uh, but Brighton, outside of those two chances, weren't really exist or were very non-existent, but the chances were good. Matoma was able to get behind and force a pretty good Trafford save. Minta, right before the second half or right before the first half ended, is able to get behind Ait Nori for fun and just you see right here, Ait Nori needs help. He can't just guard Minta by himself, and he was never able to get that help because Marmoush wasn't really helping out there. So despite Brighton not really causing James Trafford much danger, they were giving City fits. And again, City shape out of possession. Marmoush, Holland, and Oscar Bob being very narrow, so already kind of spoke a little bit about that. But City's midfielder, Bernardo Silva, Rangers, and Rodri, just not able to handle the wide areas and to get out either. Everything was trying to stop sit Brighton from being able to play through the middle. Brighton were fine going out wide and still able to cause the issues. Brighton were able to get their fullbacks high with Kaipa and Veltman, and just again, City really did struggle a little bit with that. Uh, City was scrambling, and Brighton were just able to find passes into players making runs. And maybe Brighton could have been a little bit more threatening as far as the final end product went. But uh, it, despite City's dominance, it did feel like they were playing a little bit with fire. And I already kind of spoke a little bit about that. Too many 1v1s or 2v1s for City's fullbacks in Nunez and Ait Nori. So we get to the second half, and there is a moment where City had a chance to make it 2-0 with Oscar Bob. Uh, that it's not necessarily his fault here. It's a pretty good cross by Marmoush. It maybe goes out of reach, but at the same time, this probably needs to be converted either by Marmoush having a better ball or Bob being able to time it better. But this ball needs to be in the back of the net because it's a nice square ball across the goal. Uh, the keeper's out of position. The ball's beating the keeper, and all it takes is any kind of contact at all, and that's going to go in the net. But after that, then that was kind of the wake up call that Brighton needed. So Kushinov basically wins the ball near the halfway line, but City are able to basically. This was here to do. Oh, there's another one. This kind of goes to how it happened. So Kushinov's able to win the ball in high upfield. City are able to counter. They have Rodri to Holland. Holland plays a good ball to Marmoush, who plays again that great cross to Bob, and it's just out of reach a little bit for Bob. But Bob was getting into good areas and just seemed this was not able to lead to anything. But then we start to see Brighton press a little bit higher and braver. They're able to force City into some turnovers. Uh, Right, and also start to counter with way more speed. And again, Minta just starts to lead a lot of these counters on his own. Um, Brighton then playing Gomez, making a run behind. Gomez makes a well-timed run ahead of Welbeck, and Welbeck plays him in. Kushinov, the last man in defense, does do enough to go to ground to buy a foul. But otherwise, Diego Gomez would have been, opposite side and probably in behind there. And then we already mentioned Kucherov, being a little bit more kind of aggressive, and he has the foul that leads to the PK. So let's get to the changes. Brighton right before that, Brighton make a four-person change sub. So Milner comes on, Gruda, Jorginho Rutter comes on instead of Welbeck, and then Ayori comes on. So Welbeck, Hinselwood, Gomez, and Baliba go off. This does change in Brighton's favor a little bit here, and then Pep responds as well. And you could maybe as good as the changes worked for Brighton, the opposite really, for Man City. Pep brings on Nico O'Reilly to play in midfield, Rico Lewis instead of Mateus Nunes, and then Jeremy Doku and Ruben Diaz. And so the issue really is Jeremy Doku, uh, you know, wasn't really able to be threatening when he came on. But really, it was Ruben Diaz. Ruben Diaz instead of Kushinoff, because now you have Stones and Ruben Diaz playing in a quote unquote high line, and then you have Rico Lewis at right back, who is 5'7", 5'8". Even with Matoma or a De Kuiper or someone on it, that's going to be a problem if Rico Lewis has to do something in the air, or Rico Lewis has to has to do some kind of defensive duel. And so, O'Reilly comes on, and he has a couple poor touches as well that lead to some Brighton moments. And then again, Ruben Diaz and Stones in the high line, and that really is risky. And so as the game went on, again, it felt the only winner was going to be Brighton. So we have a chance where Van Hecke on a corner kick, rebound, forces a really good Trafford save. So good bounce back game for James Trafford as well. We're talking about this, and we're not really mentioning Trafford's name that much, which is a good thing after what happened with Spurs, but it wasn't enough because Man City had brought in Giorgino Donnarumma of PSG. So, and then we have another chance here. Matoma frees himself, gets a good look at goal. Again, Aït-Nouri not able to do much defensively, and the shot just misses wide. Menta really was unplayable. But we'll get to the goal here. So Brighton get this because, and even before this, Gruda was in behind and was able to get a decent kind of moments where I think Aït-Nouri was able to block his shot. Otherwise, that could have maybe gone in as well. But we have a long ball here by Dunk, and there shouldn't be a problem. But Rico Lewis has left his man to press someone ahead of him, and the ball goes over him. So now Rico Lewis is out of the play. John Stones has to basically run out to stop this, and he does well to win the header, because if not, basically Brighton are going to get in behind, and they're going to City are done by anyway. So John Stones has to run out. He does well to win the header, but the problem is he can only head it to Aït-Nouri, and Aït-Nouri immediately heads the ball towards to Rutter, and Rutter is basically dragged Ruben Diaz onto him, and then Rutter just basically has a flick towards Matoma, and then Matoma immediately first times it a through ball into Gruda, making a run behind, and now no Stones, no Diaz. There's just no one in the back for Trafford. Trafford has to come out, and he does well to at least close the angle, and then Aït-Nouri tries to run back as well, and it's basically both get fooled by Gruda, doing a feint, faking a shot, then he goes with his left, gets by both, and is able to basically tap this in with his right foot to go in. A really clever finish for them. But that that was a weird game because it really was deserved for Brighton. I mean, the stats would say otherwise. 64% for City is probably what you expect, but the 2.3 xG as opposed to the 1.67, though a lot of that really was in the first half. They had the Oscar Bob moment, but that was kind of it. Brighton only had one shot in the first half, and they had 11 in the second. Brighton came to life when they needed to, and so uh, Menta. The only things to end with Brighton is they had played more than enough to have more than they had gotten in the first couple of games, where they played a pretty good game in my opinion versus Fulham, where they nearly got the 3 points and just kind of conceded on a late kind of corner kick. And then in the second game that they were part of, I thought they did a little bit more than they were rewarded. So Brighton hadn't necessarily gotten off to the best kind of start to their season. And when you're watching the City game, you heard the manager saying that there was fear that Brighton could be in the bottom three to going mid October. And I thought that really did feel a little kind of rough. To be honest. The other thing too is Baliba keeps getting subbed off after after a few kind of games, or after the first half. They said Baliba's not really fully kind of fit. There's been all the speculation maybe he could go to Man United if Man United ponied up. So they're gonna have him for at least the full year. They haven't had Reuter. Reuter wasn't able to play in the game last week. So and I feel like they did kind of miss him a little bit there as well. Reuter comes on in the second half and plays a nice little play with to Arda Güler. The other thing too is Brighton had that pretty good spot where they scored loads of goals in the EFL in the League Cup game in the midweek. So things are starting to be a little bit brighter for Brighton, and they have new center backs in case they want to finally move off from Lewis Dunk, and I don't want to say Van Hecke, but probably Lewis Dunk. So uh, Brighton uh, Brighton have a chance to do a little bit more than we've seen so far. They definitely deserve this, and so good for them. And already kind of spoke about a little bit with City here. One thing that's interesting is Nico Gonzalez to me hasn't really done anything wrong, but he gets benched, and I don't know if Nico Gonzalez and Rodri can't play together. But I don't see how personally, I think a midfield of uh, Rodri and Nico Gonzalez and Reinders is not the worst thing to go with. You're not going to lose a lot of these midfield battles where Bernardo Silva was just uh, doing cardio in this game, and that's not the only time that has happened. To me, Kushinov makes one mistake and Pep hooks him for it, but at the same time, his legs are needed. Or otherwise, City would have conceded much sooner as well. Oscar Bob and Marmish were both really poor. And that played a little bit of a role in how Brighton were able to just kind of destroy them just by Brighton's shape, and so they weren't able uh, to adjust in that respect. So someone like a Savino should immediately been able to help out. If if you're not necessarily going to have any kind of width on that side, nothing else play the better a player that is Phil Foden in that role instead. Now, maybe the idea would have been Ryan Cherky, but apparently he's already out for injury. So City already kind of not really off to their best start either. It's interesting that they have made the call to go to the new keeper in Donnarumma, who isn't necessarily great with his feet either, but he is a pretty good shot stopper. Though suspect at times as well. Though he was very good for PSG in the Champions League, going up. He was very good for Liverpool. I remember, though Harvey Elliott did kind of beat him as well. But the other thing is, so already mentioned City kind of being pretty bad out of possession. City's build a play was kind of tragic too. And again, Holland just rarely able to get involved, rarely get any touches. It didn't feel like Marmoush was helping out either. It just felt like the City of old would have done much better to play around Brighton in a way to you've got Van Hecken playing in a high line, or you've got Dunk playing in a highish line. You weren't able to find Holland to be able to find those spaces or gaps. It felt like City were keeping the ball a lot of that second half, but they weren't going anywhere, and just that's not the Man City of old. So again, Rodri's back. Rodri doesn't really fix this, and I do wonder if if you're going to play Oscar Bob in that kind of the kind of way that they played him, where then they didn't really keep him wide. I thought they kept him more wide versus Wolves. If you're going to play him so narrow, someone like a Phil Foden probably should play instead. And we really haven't seen him. Even still, it's not just a year ago where you understand maybe Foden was a little burnt out. After the amazing year he had, Player of the Year, and then he had the Euros, and Euros didn't really go well for him, and just all of last season didn't go well for him. So you understand a year, being off it, but now they really shouldn't be unless he has some kind of physical ailments. You don't understand why he is still not in the picture all of a sudden either. So maybe we'll see him versus Man United. I don't know. Uh, and speaking of, we will go to Man United and Burnley. This game ends 3-2, where Burnley again, or Man United again, just seem to they seem to just give everyone kind of fits. We'll just kind of put it that way. You never know what you're going to get. It will be unpredictable. I guess we can say that. So it does end 3-2. We have an own goal where Casemiro had bounces off Cullen. At that point, it did feel deserved. Man United were all over them, all over Burnley. Mason Mount was playing these balls in behind to finding Embrema. Embrema was doing a very good job to be dangerous. And we actually see Embrema get his first goal as far in the league, and it's a well deserved goal as well. Where it's not necessarily what Embrema does, but it's well deserved. Where they're able to get Diego Dallo in behind, and from the left side, playing a left kind of wing back, he's able to get to the byline. Has a really good cross towards the in the square ball in the penalty area, where Bremer is able to basically first time it into the net. But, for the most part, this game was Jekyll and Hyde a little bit as far as the first half and second half. First half, Man United, it felt, Mateus Cunha started off well, and then he gets hurt, and then the interesting thing to me was, Ruben Amorim brought on, Xerxes, who we hadn't really, talked about, or we hadn't really heard about. You almost forgot that he was even on the squad, still. They've gotten rid of Erasmus Højlund to Napoli, and they still had Xerxes, and it wasn't Sesko. So, maybe they're still trying to, wade, figure out how Sesko is going to fit into the squad as far as out of possession, duties go. I don't really know, but it was interesting to see Xerxes come on, and it wasn't necessarily like Xerxes led to a whole lot of chances. Instead, but one thing that it did, one thing that Man United had before that was, again, they were able to find Cunha going forward, and Bremo getting more involved. It felt like Burnley were turning the ball over, and it was leading to some pretty good chances and looks. But the second half, things changed. Now, Man United is still in this game with like 28 shots or whatever it was, but Burnley outshot them, or at least outshot them in the second half, and outshot them as far as shots on target. So Man United were still able to be threatening in the second half, but a lot of these were not really threatening as far as shots on target. And Burnley just started to kind of figure out Man United, and so we get to the 1-1 with Foster, and then basically it's either Foster or someone else is able to get a second one, makes it 2-2. Foster actually scored another time as well. He made a pretty good run in behind, and that was kind of called off for an offsides. It felt very very harsh, to say the least. So it felt like 2-2 was going to be deserved. There was all this talk that this game was a must win, or it was sackable. I didn't really buy into that, because they have invested so much into this guy. Uh, you have his identity all over the team now, that you can't just find another manager that's going to be able to make this work, essentially, other than someone that plays the exact same way. But we'll get to that. I mean, they fully committed to this guy now. But that said, this would have been a very very disastrous kind of result, just because you have what happened with Grimsby, and then you turn around, and this wasn't necessarily the most convincing kind of performance, but who knows? They were able to grit it out. Bruno was able to convert a very late PK that Amadiello was able to buy late. Burnley have to kick themselves a little bit there. I think it's Jaden Anthony who had a pretty good game for Burnley, but he's more of an attacker, and he just kind of freaks out when he tugs Diallo from behind, grabbing the shirt. It's the right call. I'm not saying it's not the right call, but I am saying the uh, Anthony didn't have to do that. I can't say that, because he has a teammate uh, right next to him, and Amadiello is not really going to be able to get by him. But you freak out in that kind of situation. And the other kind of thing to say is that if you're kind of an attacking team with the ball, late in the game, trying to make things happen, that's what you want. You want to get into that kind of you want to get in those stances, those situations where force someone to freak out. Uh, you know, just force the issue, essentially, and that is what happened. And so, getting to kind of the headlines here. The other thing too is, the Grimsby game happens, in my opinion, because Amorim played Onana, and it didn't seem like these first couple of games here. It doesn't really feel like he loves. Uh, he loves the Bayindir, the second guy, and so they went out, and one of the things they did do in the transfer end was they brought in Sign Lemons of Antwerp, highly sought after prospect in Europe for his season last year. But again, coming in new league, we'll see how he adjusts. All he has is Man City and Erling Haaland as his first test, but yeah, they needed something. Onana was not going to work after the Grimsby game. The fans have completely turned on him. I think fans have turned on him even before that. But Bayindir hasn't really been that convincing either. And one of the reasons why Burnley get that second goal is Bayindir has a spill on one of the shots. Maybe it's a little bit harsh, but at the same time, he hasn't really been convincing for any kind of set pieces. Not certainly not versus Fulham. and then obviously not versus Arsenal. So Man United do have their new keeper, and so we'll see if that leads to a change or not. But we get to kind of the lineup and the shape they did. We continue to see the same kind of thing with this back threes. Where you see Lenny Euro, Delict, and Shaw. And the one thing to say here is Shaw can be decent on the ball, but at the same time, he's not a center back. And basically, Burnley get back into this game because of Shaw. Shaw and Delict have a little bit of a confused, uh, you know, are confused on what to do. But also Diego Dallo. Diallo is played at left wing back instead of Patrick Dorgu. And I kind of thought about that after the Fulham game is Patrick Dorgu has come in to be kind of Ruben Amorum's kind of solution for that left side, and already he's been benched, and he's been benched for good reason. He hasn't been good. Dallo actually was quite good, at least going forward, but at the same time he gets stuck here, and maybe because he's not always playing on the left side, I don't know. But they we get to when we get to the Burnley goal, they basically take advantage of Dallo and Shaw and Delict all kind of getting lost on who to mark who. They would get the ball out wide, and it's a free cross, and then they lose basically uh, Lyle Foster as well. And then we get the other part of the lineup is Amad Diallo still playing at wingback, and then Casemiro Bruno, and then Embremo, Cunha, and Mason Mount. I still don't really like how they're playing with Mason Mount. Uh, but yeah, I don't really love the idea of Bruno where being played where he is either. And we actually see in the second half, one of the changes is we see Kobe Mano come on, and we actually see Bruno played a little bit further ahead. Uh, but it just it feels like they've made some weird buys. They've spent a whole lot this summer, and they've made some weird buys. You bring in a striker for $90+ million, and he's not starting. And Sesko, they're still not really able to get him involved when they find him. And it's not like Man United are really a cross focus kind of team either. And it's not maybe Sesko can be a counter kind of a transition kind of attacker, counter attacker, but I don't feel like that is what he is. I think he gets the ball and he likes having a big shot on him. He gets the ball into the box. He likes putting things away. Bruno can find him. Mason Mount can find him and create for him there. But it doesn't feel like you're going to necessarily get a whole lot of help from the wingbacks. Maybe in Bremo. When he gets forward. But the other thing too is Man United out of possession are a mess, and that continues to be a theme. That's not really a change, but the thing to talk about is in that second half, someone like Bremo needs to do much better to track back because that leads them being exploited. Bruno doesn't really know how to play that position either, and sometimes Casemiro is a little bit too much by himself. You have Delict that never really knows when to step up, when to not. That back line really is a problem. And so Man United have spent all this money on their attack front, and you look at the back, and you struggle to understand how they've allowed necessarily that to happen because that back line is trouble, and they're going to get some goals. They'll be exciting, but they're going to concede a lot as well, and with starting with Burnley, so we'll get to kind of what happened here. We had the Cunha injury. He was playing well too. So is that we'll have to see how long he's out for as well. It's not the end of the world because basically they can play either Mason Mount or they can play Bruno there instead, and that maybe makes you a little bit better with playing someone else in midfield. Next to Casemiro. I don't really know if that necessarily is Kobe Mano though, and we'll kind of get to that as well. Though he didn't necessarily have that bad of a game either. Uh, but already kind of mentioned the Bruno chances or the Bremer chances. Mason Mount nearly draws a PK on Kyle Walker. Kyle Walker back at Old Trafford, joining Burnley, but that is overturned though. So we have a moment here where there's a chance to really go 2-0, and this probably maybe this goes in, and this actually the second half doesn't even happen for Burnley. So when you get chances like this, you need to put them away. I think this is a kid situation of just two left-footed players, biting you here. And Bremo gets free, and it's a decent counter by United. I think Xerxes has a nice little header to flick on, and they're able to go upfield. There's a long ball that finds Embremo, and then Embremo has a square ball across the goal. It's a pretty good decision, but he uses the outside of his left foot. He doesn't just use his right foot, and so that produces maybe a weird kind of spin or bounce on the ball. And what happened? He kind of scoops it as well. And so it's bouncing awkwardly for Amad Diallo, and instead of just, again, him using his right foot to hit this, he tries to position his body to hit it with his left, and what he does is he slices it. And again, just 2 instances where, again, 2 left foot dominant players, played together hurts you, and it's very awkward because Amad Diallo, you're playing both, you either, ahead of each other, and eventually one's gonna have to hold width and one's gonna have to, swing some, crosses in. Otherwise, again, that's not gonna work. So the makeup, the profiling of this feels wrong. But what I really want to talk about is the second half, mostly because of what Burnley were able to do. But make they made they created their problems because of what Man United shape we were doing as well. Anyways, I'll explain on that. So we have Kobe Mano starts the second half, so it pushes Bruno higher. United do start the second half okay, but Burnley start to find some more time on the ball here. They're starting to force more turnovers as well. They're able to take advantage of it. Amad Diallo being so attack minded, and then Abramo being too lazy defensively. So that's hurting their right side. Burnley take advantage of Luke Shaw and Diego Dallo as well, being lazy out of position. So we get to the goal. It's a situation of Burnley having really nice possession. They're able to allow players to lose their man. There's good runs by Foster and Larson here. Diego Dallo is forced to be kind of the third center back in this kind of situation because Luke Shaw has gone up and gotten himself caught trying to catch the ball in midfield. He's not able to get back. If he can sprint back, I don't think this goal happens, but he takes way too long to get back. He just walks back into position, and then he walks back into position on the right side and is just marking no one in the middle. Uh, so Dallo is playing in Shaw's position. That means Delict doesn't know where he's supposed to go either. And you see Diego Dallo and Delict basically just running it, talking to each other, being upset at each other that there's no one playing left wing back here. Mateus Delict doesn't want to go out wide and defend the wide areas. That is supposed to be Dallo's position, but Dallo doesn't want to leave the player he's marking. And so Burnley, see that. I think it's Kyle Walker that sees that. Immediately they see how open Larson is, and he gets the ball, and Diego Dallo can't basically get stuck and can't get out on time to stop that free cross in the box. And then the other issue is Lyle Foster is able to time his run, and he's able to just get away from Luke Shaw. Luke Shaw's beating on a really good cross, but also at the same time, Luke Shaw is 6 foot or so. If you had an actual center back being played instead, if you're going to play a back three, I think they're able to head this way. So someone like a Harry Maguire maybe would have worked out instead. Now, Harry Maguire offers you other problems, so that I'm not necessarily saying Harry Maguire needs to start, but it's weird to play a back three when you're not playing with three centers backs, uh, and it's weird to play a back three when you can't defend crosses into the air. So it was deserved as well. They're starting to Burnley are starting to get more attacks going. Um, the other thing too is Man United do respond. They do respond right off the kickoff as well. All this happens immediately following. They're able to get Brian and Bremo free and square ball into the box, and he's able to finish. So pretty, Diego Dallo at least makes up for his mistake. But Burnley really did start to kind of take a little bit more kind of control of this. So we have the Burnley score, and it's Foster again, but it's offsides but barely the VAR on his shirt. But what happens here is it's a nearly perfect through ball and then Foster is able to go around by Deer, taps it in. Delict and Shaw both caught out by the run and the through ball. It's great vision by the Burnley player that plays the pass, and it's just slightly off. But it comes from Burnley's left side, where again Amad Diallo is nowhere to be found. Uh, and but at the same time, that was unlucky, but it doesn't take long for Burnley to actually get the second that they did deserve. And it comes from really just a poor pass by Casemiro to Lenny Yora. So Burnley are able to get a cheap throw in that they don't really deserve. And they basically had two throw ins in a row where, first one is defended, but the second one they're able to get someone in. And they I think it's they're able to do a long throw in here. And Esteve outjumps Euro, and then again Shaw heads the ball right to a Burnley player, someone better in the air, maybe is able to clear this. And again, someone like a Maguire maybe clears this better. Uh, the Burnley player is able to get a shot off. That's saved, but Bindier play parries it right into Foster's path, and that's where he's able to basically bang it in. And then again in the dying minutes, Amad Diallo is able to buy the PK. So uh, Man United did have 26 shots, only 6 on target, 4 big chances as well. But 15 shots versus wait. Burnley had 3 shots on target in the second half versus United's 2. That's where we're at. So, uh, yeah, this was, it didn't need to be as, it didn't need to be as exciting for Man United fans. But they're able to at least get something to get the Grimsby game out of their mouth. The Cunha injury though is we'll see how that impacts them. Going forward, we'll see if that changes Bruno's role again. We'll see if we see Casemiro and Kobe Mano played instead. It wasn't. I don't really think it was good enough in the second half. Kobe Mano, I don't really think is necessarily at fault, but I do think Casemiro he's getting outrun. He's getting out of position. He can't cover all that ground by himself, and he doesn't really have defensive help either. He was really good versus Arsenal, and that's the reason why Man United were pretty good versus Arsenal. But you just don't see how Casemiro can do that week to week. Manuel Ugarte, whenever he plays, just seems to be a little bit of a the the bomb is at his foot kind of player. He doesn't seem to have any kind of touch at all. Amorim needs to find a way to make the Manuel Ugarte that worked for him in Portugal to work here, or this really is not going to work because there's a reason why they've been linked to Baliba and linked to spending another 100 million or whatever it is on a player. They need to have someone else in midfield for them. Uh, they were linked to maybe sending out Kobe Mano right before deadline day. So it doesn't even seem like Amorim is fancying Kobe Mano, but they need someone. They need someone to be able to be able to handle issues out of possession. But the problem is Kobe Mano isn't the best, isn't the quickest, either. He's not really the best when it comes to defensively defensive awareness. He's more kind of a box to box kind of midfielder. Uh, he's not really the best passer. He can go forward with it, and he can be exciting going forward with it. But again, you're just seeing there are lots of ways where this is still kind of struggling for them a little bit. So that's where we are. They're shaky again on set pieces as well. I mean, the goal comes from basically a throw in, and so that's kind of where we are there. I mean, for Burnley, I don't necessarily know if this is enough for them to stay up, but they're competitive in most of the games they play. I was wondering if they were just going to be a very defensive minded kind of team because that's all you heard about with Scott Parker last year in the championship, and their shape's pretty good, and they've got ability to play out wide. They've got when you get someone like a Jaden Anthony and Foster, they make good runs. They're not going to have a lot of the ball. You can't say that, but they got into pretty good moments where they got into transitions where if a better pass had been on, they would have been in behind easily. So, the structure pretty good. Ukachukwu, I thought, did a decent job in midfield. Hannibal offered pretty good energy, making a return to Old Trafford as well. The second half, the first half, they were allowing Mbeumo to get behind and free way too often. The second half, I thought they did better. So, and it just, Jaden Anthony just makes a mistake as the attacking player trying to defend at the back. So that's where we are there. All Man United have coming up is Man City and Erling Haaland. But that said, all they did last year was give Man City problems as well. It might have been actually one of Amorim's kind of first victories where Amadiala was able to get in behind. But we'll see if both clubs in Manchester want to after the international break want to immediately get that game going and to change the narrative. We'll see if maybe Harry Maguire does return because we saw that last season. That actually gave Man City a lot of fits with Harry Maguire and De Ligt kind of playing a little bit of more of a low or deep block, trying to be purely transition based. I actually thought a year ago Xerxes played pretty well. Amad Diallo obviously played pretty well as well. So we'll see if that'll actually be the idea again, or if it'll be what was it Xerxes? Maybe it was Rasmus Højlund that actually either way. Uh, it was definitely Amad Diallo. Amad Diallo played well for them last, as did Bruno. Bruno played pretty well a year ago as well. So we'll see that matchup again, and again, obviously Erling Haaland's going to love the idea of going against big Casemiro and as far as the only protection, and then just a very slow Man United back line as well. Uh, but we'll move on to Spurs and Bournemouth. There's not a ton to talk about as far as the actual game goes, mostly because Bournemouth got so many shots off, but not a lot. Well, Vicario did have to work a whole lot, but that was really kind of the main gist. They had 20 shots, 6 on target. Vicario easily man of the match, at least in that respect. Spurs, the storyline for them is they were not good. They were hit with a brick saw, and they came into this on that Man City uh, Man City victory where everyone was praising him. Everyone was praising Thomas Frank. Bringing him as far as the hiring went. There was all this upbeat optimism, and then they go into they fail the Andre Iraola test. And one thing to talk about, I even mentioned it last week, is it's one thing to play against Man City where they're going to have the ball, and you're just your job is to set up a really well out of possession, and to just try to hit something on the break. It's not really like they played through Man City that well. Bournemouth were always going to be a different kind of task because they play without the ball as well, and basically they're the best pressing team in the entire league, maybe in all of Europe. And Thomas Frank went with a midfield that didn't really suit that. And it felt like the defenders weren't really comfortable on the ball being pressed. The midfielders weren't comfortable on the ball. You're trying to get the ball and being pressed, and you got to a point where they were starting to kind of hide from the ball, and so all Tottenham were able to do is they forced to go long, and Mateus and Kudus wasn't able to make the ball stick with him. I thought Truffart did an unbelievable job on Kudus, but also Richarlison. Richarlison was not able to get away from Bournemouth, following him man to man. I thought Diakate was doing an unbelievable job shadowing him, and just Richarlison, every time he was trying to get to the ball, was just losing it as well. And I thought the other thing too is Bournemouth recognized like really early on, Jed Spence is a very good player defensively. Jed Spence being played on the left isn't the best going forward and doesn't have really the most confidence with his left foot. And so they were forcing him to beat them with his left foot. And the other thing too is they were forcing Brendan Johnson to kind of do the same. And you saw Brendan Johnson really struggle. He was struggling to get the ball, and when he was getting it, he wasn't really able to get free that much either. And he was going against Adam Smith. And then Adam Smith gets hurt, and maybe it actually helped Bournemouth a little bit because the replacement came in and he had a little bit more kind of physical energy to at least handle Brendan Johnson trying to run behind him. And so Spurs were able to do nothing, and at least for 70 minutes into the game. I don't even think they had a shot. I don't think they even had a corner kick. And then Bournemouth's maybe legs kind of tired a little bit. Thomas Frank did make a couple changes where he brought on the likes of Bergfall. He brought on Mateus Tell. I think Odegaard came on as well. Things changed slightly after that, but it was a little basically too little, too late. I think they only ended with 5 shots, anyways, and only one was on goal, and I think that was the Bergvall chance that came. This was a wake up call, really, because a lot of this was just uh, on the midfield that Thomas Frank went with. Bittencourt, Paulinho, and Sarr can be a really good midfield in certain game states. This was not the one to do that with, and we saw him do this. Make the right change versus Burnley. We saw this midfield was PSG, and then the first game with Burnley he plays. He doesn't go with this. He went with Archie Gray and he went with Bergvall in that game with Sarr. I feel like that maybe you don't necessarily need to play both Gray and Bergvall together, but one of them needs to play because this game, Paulinho, who had so much hype and praise and deservedly so, versus Man City a week ago, was kind of the donkey in this case. But it wasn't just him. Van de Ven really struggled when it came to being pressed. He didn't like his options going forward, so he would pass it to Spence, and Spence would immediately be under pressure as well, and he wouldn't know what to do either. And Paulinho, to me, was kind of the one that started to hide a little bit. I didn't think Betancourt or Saad helped out much either, and just so I thought the midfield was a little bit off. I thought also Pedro Porro's side defensively was a little bit off because Kudus wasn't really helping out defensively, and on the other end, Porro had no way to handle and stick with Antoine Semenyo. And this case really became a case of just the 1v1 situations where Semenyo was a one-man wrecking crew, but also Evan Nilsson as well. And so we look at the Bournemouth lineup. It was Adam Smith, Diakate, tremendous job on Richarlison, Senese as well. Senese maybe a little bit lucky not to be sent off versus Liverpool, but he's turned around and had, two back-to-back good games as well, and he has the assist that leads to the goal. And then Truffet, um, the Kirkhouse replacement, he did a really good job on Kudus, which is not an easy thing to do. And then the interesting thing is you have Tyler Adams kind of just the protection in front of the back line, and that's just it. Tyler Adams had probably his best game as far as a professional goes that I've ever seen. Now, he's asked to do a different job with Bournemouth than we see with the US, so maybe that kind of plays a little bit of a role here. But he a lot of the reasons why Spurs were not able to receive the ball at all is Adams was just always there, if not applying the pressure himself, joining in and being a second man, and he was doing a really good job to just jar turnovers and to just read passes, read passing lanes, and intercept them. He was everywhere, but also he had help. He had Tavernier and Adam Scott, and Alex Scott was very, very good as well. And then you had John Brooks, who was doing well to offer some width and offer some attack going forward, and also Antoine Semenyo. And then you always have Evan Nilsson. If nothing else, Evan Nilsson will always give you energy and pace going forward. And the only thing you can say about him is he's almost like Darwin Núñez in a sense that if he gets it going and if he gets it right, he's going to be a 20 goal a season striker. But that there is a but. He gets into so many good areas because he is so physical. He is so athletically gifted. He doesn't always have the best finish on him, but I feel like he's getting closer. A lot of these finishes in this game were on target, and it just forces Vicario to make some pretty good saves. But he gets into some insanely good areas, and just you look at this, and you have Semenyo, who's very similar in that respect as well. Semenyo gets off so many shots; he's a chance magnet. You're not able to focus on defending both Semenyo and Evan Nilsson. You have to pick, and in Bournemouth, well, just if they can get it to click, they are going to 20 goals each, which is what we saw with Embremo and Wiseau last year. But there is the but there. They do have to get better with the actual end product, but it's not. I don't think it's a technique thing. It could be just maybe nerves. Maybe they like to rush shots. I don't really know. I feel like Semenyo has gotten better in that respect, but Evan Nilsson still kind of iffy a little bit. I mean, he scores here. It's a deflection, but he takes he makes a good run, and then he has a good shot off. But I feel like he could get so many more than he does. Uh, but the other thing too is, you know, Ariola's got this team just wired, and it doesn't matter who they lose. They lose Dean Howson, they lose the entire back line essentially. They lose Zabineri, they lose uh, they lose Kirkez, and they lose Dominic Solanke. A year ago, 2 seasons ago, they lose Django Watatara, and just they're able to just plug and play. Jonathan Brooks plays this game or starts this game, and he may be unlucky not to even score. He was very, very good himself. And then his replacement was, I think, Alda of Leverkusen was quite Aldi, I think, or Adley looked look like he can be basically a Django Watatara just kind of replica. Basically, long, physical, lean, quick. It just seems their Bournemouth recruiting is outstanding. Um, yeah, I still kind of wonder if Sensei can handle playing in that kind of a high line, but he's getting better each week. But Diakate as well. Now you're not gonna get like for like replacements. You're not gonna get someone who's good on the ball as Dean Howson. You're not gonna, Zabineri was very good for them too. So you do imagine there's gonna be some kind of turnover. Uh, but at the same time, I was one that was thinking Bournemouth might actually be in trouble because they don't always have the best control. They don't need control here because you're always going to have threats in behind no matter what. There's always going to be they're not going to have the ball a whole lot. Now, maybe if they have the leads and they're trying to see games out, that's when you could maybe get into some danger where they always want to go forward. I mean, it's great for the neutral, but the reason why Tottenham came to life a little bit in the second half is Bournemouth weren't trying to see the game out. They were trying to go for that second and third goal. If they could, they kept going forward and they kept getting into the box. They kept trying to take their chances. They weren't trying to see this out, and so more times than not, they were turning it over themselves, and they were allowing actually Spurs to get some counters going. And this game easily, despite being outplayed, easily could have ended 1-1, where, Tottenham maybe could have deserved something at least at the end, but that's not the case. Either way, it's not the end of the world for Spurs. I do think it's a learning lesson for Thomas Frank, where maybe he learned to play a bit of a different midfield because once Birdball came on, there everything kind of changed. Now it helped as well that Bournemouth did not have the legs to just close down everyone for the whole 90 minutes. Eventually, you have to sit back a little bit. Um, but that just allowed Bergvall to just turn. I thought Richarlison got more touches in the box a little bit more. I thought Kudus did a little bit better job in that second half as well. And now, you've got Xavi Simmons to come on to eventually play a role in this as well. So it's going to be exciting to see how this team changes the this kind of season. The other change that Thomas Frank did, which I thought was a very good change, was he was able to bring on Udogi, who maybe wasn't fit to start the game, but kind of hurt them that he wasn't. And he took out Pedro Porro, who was really getting beaten, really getting brutalized by Semenyo in these 1v1s. And he moved Spence back to right back. That changed things as well. Spence was much better defensively. Once you're able to lock Semenyo up, that's kind of the reason why they were kind of turning the ball over a little bit more towards at least from the 80th minute on, able to get more forward. And again, Kudus, if he had just maybe better crossing on him, maybe maybe there could have been something in that for Tottenham, but it wasn't to be. And then we move on to Nottingham Forest and West Ham. Not go Those are mostly kind of the games I'm gonna speak about as far as, in detail. So I'll just kind of run down everything else that happened from here on. So we have Nottingham Forest and West Ham, probably the biggest shock of the weekend. To be honest, we had a lot of them, but it's probably this one where Graham Potter needed this. He needed a bounce back dearly and got it. But the other thing too is Nottingham Forest, after that really good Brentford win, turned around and were a little bit of a little bit flat and stale versus Crystal Palace a week ago. And the leading up into the Crystal Palace game was how that might be the last game that we see of Nuno Espirito Santo because the owner wants maybe a different manager, more kind of a progressive manager than a pragmatic one. Wants someone to be more kind of attack minded, more uh, uh, a more kind of a different kind of style that maybe Nuno is built to do. Now that said, be careful for what you ask for because the way that the team has been organized, it's perfect for the center backs that they have and the defenders that they have, as opposed to if you want to bring someone else in that plays a more kind of attack minded, more kind of a press focused kind of style, you could maybe get exposed a little bit. And so we'll see what they do in that respect. It actually has come out now that it is going to be Ange Postecoglou, the former Spurs manager. So everyone knows about him and playing that high line. I don't necessarily know if that'll work at Nottingham Forest. Now that said, it's not like Postecoglou can't be pragmatic because we did see him. That's how they win. That's how they beat Man United in the Europa final. They played pretty a pretty deep and low block, mid block defensive line. And one thing I can say is he's very good at doing designing passages of play and build up. Spurs were one of the absolute best when it came to uh, build up possessions from the back that led to at least a shot or some kind of shot defining action. Uh, so we'll see if he's able to change Forest around. I mean, you look at the squad makeup, you don't see why they can't be very good on the ball. Elliot Anderson is a very, very good midfielder. Gibbs White, everyone keeps speaking about him, and rightly so. Maybe people have ignored Elliot Anderson, but he's very good as well. I feel like in Singar is not that bad, but if he doesn't work, maybe you can find someone else to play in there as well. I feel like the fullbacks at least have a lot to offer as far as going forward and crosses. And then you got Chris Wood, who's always going to be an option as well. But Forest also have a lot of options if it's not going to just be Chris Wood. They brought in a few a few strikers as well. And the only thing I can think about here is one of the things that's come up is the reason why Nuno has had a bit of a falling out with both the owner and maybe the sporting director is Nuno wanted to bring his guy in when they sold Anthony Elanga, which is the Dama Traore. And Forrest wanted nothing to do with that. And as I've seen online, people are taking the far side, and I understand that. Usually, it's not really the best when it comes to managers wanting to bring in old players. But that said, you've lost someone with Anthony Elanga's pace and ability to play a certain kind of way. Now, Adama Traore has never been good with the end product and never been good with his crossing, but one thing he does offer you is pace. And the player that they're playing in the last couple of games has been Dan Ndoye, who I like, but he's not playing on the wing all the time. He's moving around. And I think he's given Nottingham Forest shape issues, in my opinion. I think it's confusing Chris Wood because he wants to play through the middle sometimes, and Chris Wood's actually having to go out wide and play out there. We definitely saw that versus Crystal Palace. So starting to see some issues there. There's not much to talk about at all in the first half for both teams, but West Ham do show up in the second half, and a lot of it comes with Graham Potter making some changes. He brings on some subs, and that's what does it. So Bowen and then Paqueta gets a PK, caused created by Somerville. Somerville, I think, is responsible for the first goal as well. So Somerville is one of the players that comes on. We hadn't seen him all year, so it's good for West Ham to actually see him back. You lose Kudus, and it's not necessarily like Somerville is like for like, but Somerville is a direct. He's good with the ball, kind of feet, kind of attack minded player with legs. Good pace to him, despite maybe being a little bit short of stature. So that is someone that they've needed. So he comes on and he immediately is a difference maker. And then Callum Wilson made it 3-0 and also could have been 4-0, where Bowen had a great run, just dribbled through the entire Nottingham Forest back line, and Wilson actually took it off him and ruined it. But the changes were needed. So what happened is, let's see, he brings on Irving, a big young midfielder, with some legs. It's not just Suchek now. He brings on Callum Wilson, and immediately you see he gets the ball and he's going to do something more with it than we saw with Fulkrug. And he starts to create some chances. We start to see West Ham doing better with second balls in midfield. Paqueta, especially, is more involved. And then Wilson, starts to get more involved. He starts to get the ball and he starts to getting upfield. It's all about advancing the ball upfield. Then you get into the box. Well, you see if you can create something from there or not. But the other thing too is just Forest lose track a little bit in the second game. They aren't able to make the passes stick. The game becomes more of a transition game. The game becomes more of a no team really has control. The ball's just up in the air. Who can win some duels? And really, the goal comes from the goal comes from winning one of those kind of balls in the air or after a ball is bounced. I think it's Irving that wins the header, and you're able to play Somerville in, and then Somerville is able to find Bowen, and then Bowen just has a snapshot, and that's how you get the first goal. And then the second one comes from it's either a corner kick or it's another kind of transition base where again Somerville is able to get on the ball and able to just dribble all the way up into the box, and then he's able to draw the PK. So just West Ham did not have this in the first couple of games. The other thing too was we see Potter switch to a back three, uh, and, or switch from his back three to a back four. So we saw and we saw a different kind of we saw a different kind of or your personnel used as well. No Wan-Bissaka that really did not have his best game versus Chelsea. So we see Kyle Walker-Peters and we see Mavropanos and Kilman. So Tadibo was kind of, I guess, blamed a little bit for the Chelsea game too, but he also didn't have his best game. I highlighted that as well. And then Diop, and then James Ward-Prowse and Souček. And James Ward-Prowse and Souček is not going to help you in any kind of midfield for most games. They weren't able to do much in that first half, and that's when bringing on someone like an Irving or even a Potts helps out. So if nothing else, they have some legs here. And then Paqueta was able to help out at least in that respect as well. The other one too is we didn't necessarily see it for the goal, but before that, they used Mateus Fernandez, and he offered something more going forward as well. And you can probably play him a little bit further back if you need to as well. So he'll look to be a good signing, and I do believe they did get that Sikiru Magasa signing as well. So eventually, you'll probably see him instead of James Ward-Prowse, and you'll probably see a Magasa or a Mateus, and then Makeda kind of midfield, or even an Irving or a Potts kind of midfield. You'll see a different kind of West Ham, and then you'll always have Bowen. Maybe you'll rotate between Fulkrug and Callum Wilson, and then on the left side you'll either have Somerville or Lewis Guillaume. It's not the best, but it's not the end of the world as well. That might be enough for them to be helped out. They needed to do something because they didn't have. You play James Ward-Prowse and Souček midfield. You play Mavropanos and Kilman. that back line and midfield's gonna get overrun. Fulkrug doesn't have any kind of running ability, either. He can actually be a finisher. Actually, I as long as Callum Wilson can stay healthy, maybe you actually start him and then maybe bring Fulkrug on in second halves, I don't know. The issue will be if can Callum Wilson stay healthy because he's had that issue with Newcastle, over the many years. If he can't, then maybe they'll be fine. To be honest, he'll always Callum Wilson will sniff out some chances, for them. He's always been good at that. Also, it was interesting how Paqueta, is the one that takes the PK. It's not Jared Bowen, and he made a interesting kind of celebration towards the end as well. He pretended like he was taking a phone call and hanging up on an agent because a lot of speculation coming into this game was he was going to leave, maybe to join Aston Villa. So, that kind of, closed that up, and, weirdly enough, West Ham had benefited a little bit from that betting scandal. They've been able to keep a legitimate, very, very good player, that, and the issue has more been just how do you find a way to surround him with good players as well to get the best out of him. And finally, we saw that kind of, come out. So, the game ends with West Ham having 12 shots, 9 came in the second half. Uh that was, yeah, and 2.4 XG to Forest's, point 7. And, it's another case where Forest have majority of the ball, 87% passing actually, pretty, solid, at least in that respect. But it also becomes a situation of what happens when, you're playing a team that also doesn't really care having the ball. That was kind of the issue that happened with Nottingham Forest last season. And then towards the end, they just I think it's even Sangori that has the foul, but, just not able to handle, Somerville not able to handle, uh, West Ham being able to have attackers that were able to be, direct, towards the end. They just lost in the final 10 minutes. And then we'll move on to Crystal Palace and Aston Villa. This ends 3-0 with Mateta having the PK, and then Mark Gahey having an unbelievable strike, and then Sarr. And, the things to talk about here is, let's see. The things to talk about here is Unai Emery and Aston Villa continue to just have a miserable start to their season. They it just the PSR stuff continues to just kind of flummox me a little bit because again, Aston Villa have I think one thing you can do about this, and Newcastle, this hurt them as well. Aston Villa have owners and they want to spend, but the problem is they've already spent more than they bring in as far as revenue goes, and that's the reason how the PSR factors in. But what they've done is they've attracted some pretty good players, but they've done it by increasing their revenue sales. I mean, they've increased their wage bill. And the problem is now they've gotten to a point they can't bring in players in anymore without player sales. And the thing I want to say here is this is a team last year that was in the Champions League, and I just feel like whether or not they're going to bring in revenue or not, there needs to you have to allow teams to have bigger squads if you're in the Champions League. And this is going to seem like this is another kind of leg up to teams already at the top, but it's not even teams necessarily at the top. Uh, how are you going to allow clubs to move up the ladder in that respect if you're not going to at least give some kind of leeway? So, in my opinion, if you're in the Champions League squad, you should have maybe instead of 3 years, maybe give them an extra year, maybe give them 4 years to comply when it comes to the profit and sustainability stuff. That way, you give them an option to maybe buy some players on debt, to increase your squad. Because I feel like the way that they've done is set up to really it's set up to reward clubs that already have established names and established markets, especially not necessarily in Europe or England or in America, but in Asia or in Africa. And that's how a lot of these clubs are able to kind of just spend no matter what, just and there's never any kind of profit and sustainability kind of issues when it comes to Aston Villa is getting hit for this when maybe a Chelsea or Man United or whoever isn't. That to me isn't right. And Aston Villa have owners that want to spend and they're just not able to. Now you don't want to necessarily say owners should be able to just spend no matter what, but Aston Villa have come over the last couple of years from basically being promoted, and then finally able to to staying up, and then they bring Unai Emery in, and he's able to get them in the Champions League, and they possibly could have won it last year, to be honest. They took PSG to the very end, in that second half where PSG had to just really hang on, and the issue is a lot of that was because they had Marcus Rashford and they've lost him. They weren't able to keep him on loan. They had Mark Asensio. They were able to do a lot of these deals on loan, and unfortunately for them, a lot of the players that they have actually bought, someone like a Daniel Mallon, it doesn't feel like Unai Emery trust. And so all of a sudden, you look at this team. They've sold Leon Bailey as well. This team doesn't have wide options, and if they don't have 1v1 wingers. For a couple of years, it was Leon Bailey and Ollie Watkins just being a two-man, just 1v1 show. Um, and now you're relying on Morgan Rogers to create, and it seems like what he likes doing is he likes creating himself. For with runners ahead of him, he's not really a 1v1 kind of a winger out wide, and so you, they're using they're using fullbacks that they've had for many years now in Digna and Cash, or maybe it's Matson. But similar kind of back line as well, and it just feels the team all of a sudden has hit a little bit of a rut where they are a little bit stale. Ollie Watkins has suffered the most out of this because he doesn't have creation behind him anymore. Um, and so one thing that they did do in the deadline day is they did do a deal with Liverpool to bring in someone like a Harvey Elliott, and I don't really know how they're going to play him, but if they do something where they play someone like an Elliott in a diamond, and they have Elliott underneath, and you've got Watkins on one side and Rogers ahead of him, that to me could be really entertaining. Because Elliott, you'd have some runs ahead to make room for Elliott, and Elliott's very good with the ball at his feet. Now Elliott, what he's not going to be able to do is he's not going to be the best when it comes to if you play him out wide, you stick him out wide, and you ask him uh, to uh, to beat a man 1v1 in that respect too, because he doesn't really have the body or ability to do that. Now he's very good with the ball at his feet. He's very nifty and uh, he's skilled when it comes to just being able to dribble through pressure. He's I don't want to say English Bernardo Silva, but he's that kind of. If he does play out wide, that's the kind of player he is. They also have Emi Buendia. That is a similar kind of player in that respect as well. But they've given Elliott the number 9 shirt, so I think they're going to play him, and we'll see if he's able to use the runs of Rogers and Watkins to maybe create. I think the idea is to play him as a false 9, so we'll see if that happens or not. That's not a way that Liverpool played him. But this would be really exciting to see if that is the idea. Uh, but other than that, they're struggling a little bit. They're struggling for creativity. They struggle to get Rogers going. They struggle to get Ollie Watkins going. And on the other end, yeah, Crystal Palace continue to just find ways to win despite what's happened. And Mark Gay, he gets a goal. It's an unbelievable goal as well. And the funny thing about them is there's all this talk about lately, how do you make back threes work? Because, Ruben Amorim's Man United. One of the things that Oliver Glasner has is he's got a center back like a Mark Gahey, and Mark Gahey actually is responsible for the first goal as well, or the PK, is he's able to get his center backs higher up into a situation where they're going to get advanced and they're going to make the extra man still count going forward. Also, he's always going to have width from the wing backs. He's not afraid of playing the center backs in a high line because Maxence Lacroix is very good defending, making recovery runs. Chris Richards is good as well. Also, Mark Gahey. So they were able to, yeah, and both can handle defending out wide as well if that's needed. And you got the wing backs that he likes. He likes playing both high, with Tyreek Mitchell and both and Munoz. Both are good at getting crosses off, and you always have Mateta, who's good in the air, who's always going to be a threat for defenders as well. And the only issue is you've lost someone like an Eza now, and before you lost Ulize. So you figured coming into this game, you figured someone like a Sar really needed to step up because they needed to get goals somewhere. Um, Kamada was played instead of the Delvany guy that was played last week. Kamada didn't have the worst game, but that's you saw maybe what the idea can be going forward in the second half because Jeremy Pino, who well, I struggled to say his name last week, he came on in the second half and he looked very, very bright. He has a lot more pace to his game than I was expecting. So we'll see if he's able to handle the new league. I think he's only 21 or 22. Now he 6 years ago, I want to say maybe 4 years ago, he wasn't. It wasn't that long when he was in Euros. I guess it was the 22 Euros. Wait, it might have been the 20. It had to be the 21 Euros because 22 we woke up. So the 21 Euros where I guess he was starting. He played some games for that Spain team. So I remember him then. I don't necessarily remember him being necessarily like this. But he must have been crazy young then. He had some giddy up to his game, and he's very quick with the ball at his feet, and he probably possibly could have scored. So they've gone out and they've recruited again. They've found someone they want to be his replacement, and we'll see. Going forward, that'll probably be the issue. The only negative thing to say about with Palace is they lose Sarr to injury, and then this Mark Gahey stuff is destroyed all the positive vibes coming into this. And now I understand it. I understand that Glasner, after losing as a didn't want to lose his captain. And and he has a brilliant goal. And basically he doesn't want to lose his captain. And the reason why he has a problem is he's probably going to walk for free, and you don't want to lose someone like this for free when you could get pretty good profit for him, and this whole profit sustainability stuff. So you don't want clubs to lose players for free. Um, but that said, all this needed to be done way earlier and more advanced. And Liverpool maybe just saw that there was an opportunity to go for Gahey late. Maybe they were targeting him earlier. Maybe the idea was Oliver Glasner thought, or Crystal Palace thought, by winning titles or trophies with Crystal Palace, by winning the Community Shield, maybe that would be enough to convince him to sign another contract, and apparently he hasn't done that. So he is going to walk for free. It's not going to be just Liverpool that look for him. He was a Chelsea academy player, so I'm sure Chelsea's going to be interested in possibly the next England captain because he is that good. He's very, very good with the ball at his feet. And a good defender. He's only 6 foot, but he's good in the air as well. He can defend the channels, and the thing to say is he probably was going to come to Liverpool to be a little bit more of a kind of a backbench kind of a player, at least until we see what happens with Kanate. But maybe the idea is you move Kanate over, and Gahey is the replacement. Because he is 2-footed and he can play anywhere. So he would have been a nice utility knife for Liverpool to have. Instead, Palace are going to enjoy him for the remaining of the season, or at least until January. We'll see if they move him in January. But it was kind of negative because I mentioned it before. A lot of pundits were trying to use him as the shining example of how to do things the right way because they were trying to attack Isak. They were trying to attack Johan Weiser of Brentford and a couple other players that were sitting out. And those players that sat out got the move that they wanted, whereas Gahey, quote unquote, did things the right way. The professionalism was the word that kept being used. And he's the one that doesn't get the move. Maybe because he was too nice. I don't know. But it seemed like his going about things in the way he did made a different kind of impression where it thought maybe the owner or maybe the manager would be able to change his mind, and they took advantage of that. So that is a little bit unfortunate. Glasner is in a weird situation as well because apparently his contract runs out in a year as well, and you don't know if they're going to extend him either, which is kind of crazy to say because Crystal Palace are in this because of him. They brought Glasner in after another Roy Hodgson stretch where it felt like Crystal Palace never going to say that they were going to be relegated, but it did feel like they were in a bad stretch. And I actually thought that they got to a point where Hodgson I think it was Hodgson for a second stretch. He misused Elise and Eze when they were both injured. So Glasner came in, immediately changed to that back three system, and it's been successful ever since he's arrived here. And all they've done is they've done a really good job to buy well. Bringing in Maxence Lacroix. They lose Anderson and bring in Lacroix. Glasner before Glasner had come in, it didn't feel like Mateta was this kind of player, and he's really helped Mateta's game out as well. It just feels they've built just the perfect kind of setup, and it has allowed Crystal Palace to win trophies. Um, but you don't know what else that can be, what else can happen after that, and so there is kind of a thinking that if a job opens up in Germany, which he won a trophy with Eintracht Frankfurt, maybe they would lose him anyways. So you don't know how Crystal Palace are going to operate in the next couple of years, and it is a shame because they're a victim of their own success because they've been so successful. Now other clubs want what they have, essentially, and that just kind of is how the food chain works a little bit in the soccer game. Um, so that's all to say about that. Let's see. Only 6 shots for Palace, but 4 on target, and Villa 13 shots and 4 on target as well. 4 big chances though for Crystal Palace, worth saying as well. Uh, and then we get to Newcastle and Leeds. Nothing to really talk about this game. It ends 0-0. No Anthony Gordon. Ursula does get his first start. But Eddie Howe goes to a back five to kind of play with 2 up front. Didn't really work. No Joe Linton in this game as well. Tonali was able to at least feature for them, so that was positive. But the thing to talk about with Newcastle is, they have the Isak, saga finally come to an end, and they're able to get Johan Weiser in, and they're able to get Nick Waltermoda in, who is a 6 foot kind of just unicorn. Basically, to me, he's what Kai Havertz is supposed to be in that kind of sense. He's maybe not the biggest goal threat, but he's not bad. He's maybe not necessarily Isaac, so it's not like for like, but what he is he's just, Weiser kind of is in that respect. Weiser's a very good finisher, but Walter Mota can play underneath a striker. He's going to be very good at linking up, and he's got for being 6'6", he could be 5'6". The way he uses his lower body, he's very technical. He's very technically gifted. Uh, and he's not the slowest in the world for being what he is, and he's got a pretty good stratum as well, but he's kinda quick side to side. At least he's got quick feet, so it's gonna be very interesting to see how this works. If nothing else, he'll always be a threat in the air. Newcastle have their strike force now, and you losing Isak sucks. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that, but they've brought in Anthony Elanga, and they brought in Walter and they brought in Wiza, and that is better than what they had last season. You still kept in Gordon as well, and that is better than what they had last season with Jacob Murphy, Isak, and Callum Wilson, who was always hurt. They've improved their attack, and you've got that midfield behind them with Tonali and Bruno, and Tonali, Bruno, and maybe Joe Linton. And if not Joe Linton, maybe Jacob Ramsey. They've quietly had a very good transfer window despite all of these PSR stuff. And now you've sold Isak for all this money. You're not going to have PSR stuff next summer, and they are in Champions League, and they're set to have a good season still, in my opinion. And they've brought in Thiaw as well, so they have some depth a little bit at the back end, and Livermento and Lewis Hall are very good for fullback options with Trippier, kind of sandwiched in there as well. So this team has options now in a way that they just didn't have before. And the only thing to say here is, and they kept with Ursula instead of and they kept Murphy as well. So the only thing to say here is by not doing this sooner, they've hurt their start to the season. But it's only 3 games in. It's going to be very exciting to see how Eddie Howe kind of adjusts having different kind of players, but they're more loaded now than they've been in the past, and they've bought well. So it's not, again, you're not going to be able to find Alexander Isak. The only thing that was close was probably Etikite, and Liverpool actually beat them to Etikite. And the thinking there is Newcastle maybe weren't going to move on Isak, and so Liverpool wanted to get someone in and just bank that in just in case. And they went back for Isak, and Isak was available, and so that's the reason why they got both. So nothing to really talk about in this game. So I'm not. Newcastle with 8 shots and 2 on target. Leeds with 10 and 1. The only thing to say about Leeds is they did nothing until they brought in Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and he was enough to at least give them something to be hopeful of. The other thing too is Leeds did have some injuries in this case, so they didn't have no Ampadu, no Tanaka. But Calvert-Lewin did offer them something. But the thing to think about here is on the edges, someone like a Dan James and Nato, they don't have creation out wide, and I don't really know if they have the best players out wide to be able to create enough goals for them. So Leeds are probably going to be difficult. It's 3 games in a row where they've other than Arsenal, 2 games here where they have been tough to beat. They were tough for Everton at least. They were able to get a couple 4 points after the first 3 games is not the end of the world. For a promoted side coming in, but that said, this is a little nerving to say the least because you don't really know. You know, Calvert-Lewin is injury prone, and after that, you just don't really see what they have elsewhere as far as where they go for goals. So, uh, more kind of a wait and see for Leeds. We'll put it that way. And then with Everton Wolves, this ends 3-2. Probably game of Saturday. I wasn't watching. I was watching. I was going in between the Man United game. I must say, and but anyways, a 5 goal thriller. The surprise though was I was praising Barry last week, and it's better that actually gets the head start. So the things to talk about with the goals, Mikalenko back as well, and he floats the ball to Grealish. Grealish has a header, back across goal, finds better for the easy tap in. But the goal here is well worked. There are a lot of players moving in, switching positions, forcing Wolves out of out of sorts. Good ball retention by Everton here, and then Wolves get one back with Wang and Munetzi just have a really nice early cross. Wolves hadn't done much, prior to this, but they are able to get in behind. It's a really nice cross by Wang, Lei Chen, or it's really nice cross by Munetzi that finds Wang Lei Chen, sprinting in behind Michael Keane and Tarkowski. So there is kind of a situation where Everton are going to be vulnerable until they get James Brathwaite back, especially with Michael Keane back there. Michael Keane and Tarkowski as a duo is not what you want if you're an Everton fan long term at least. Uh, Pickford tries to come out and it's a perfect cross and it's a really nice run in behind. And the thing to talk about Wolves is uh, they were linked to losing possibly their striker in Strand Lawson to Newcastle, and that didn't happen. But for some reason, Larson wasn't able to play in this game, but they're going to keep him, and they have him for the rest of the season. We think so. Wang, got a chance for a head start and nice little finish here. But then Ndiaye and just basically Dewsbury Hall come to life, and also Grealish as well. So here come Everton just poking the ball off Wolves, and the Wolves kind of into the pitch. Clever combo between Grealish and Dewsbury Hall, where they both link well in the box. Hall has a nice makes a run in behind. Grealish slips the ball into him. And a cutback cross. Finds Beto. He dummies it and leaves it for Ndiaye and a nice little tap in. And then Dewsbury Hall as well. Grealish gets on the ball, plays a dink pass to Hall to run into. Then Hall just has a firecracker from a tight angle and goes top ends. Maybe goal of the weekend. And back-to-back weeks, really, where Everton had a thunder goal. So maybe doing something in training that's well, because James Garner had one last week. And then Rodrigo Gomez made it 3-2. Similar goal to the first one, just just different side of the field here. Early cross into the box, and here Tarkowski is asleep again, and Mikalenko and Gomez is just kind of wait, or Mikalenko is as well, and just Gomez is just first to arrive to a ball crossed into the box. Everton are going to be fun this year. Mostly because they have more quality than I can remember with Grealish and Hall, Dewsbury Hall, and Alcaraz as well. To mention Dwight McNeil and Ndiaye, and you can add Tyler Dibling into that when they finally start to feature him. You've got players that know what to do with the ball at their feet. So we're going to see if David Moyes can be a little bit more creative when it comes to dialing up passages of play. But the also thing is they're going to be entertaining because they don't really have a midfield yet to sustain the ball, and they don't really have. They'll always be vulnerable at the back with Michael Keane next to Tarkowski. So Pickford's going to be asked to do a whole lot of saving until they get Braithwaite back. Uh, and the other thing to talk about is it's the Jack Grealish and Dewsbury Hall show in back-to-back weeks. And Grealish, good on for Everton just kind of recognizing, hey, we can maybe take advantage of this guy being available. And all he's done is produce the last couple of games. It just feels like he's doing stuff that he wasn't able to do with Man City. He's always been very positionally good at being out wide, and we see that as well. He makes them wide. Uh, but he gets the ball into the final third. You're seeing the Ashton Villa Jack Grealish return, where he is able to be a little bit more kind of mavericky. We'll see if he is able to continue this or not. But if nothing else, it's exciting for Everton fans because again, I can't remember where they had this number of players that were quite good on the ball. Where you've got difference makers now, and Beto plays here instead of Barry. I thought Barry played well for them last week as well. So, and you've got Alcaraz. Alcaraz played really well for them in the League Cup game. So, and again, Tyler Dibbling eventually to add. Dwight McNeil, I mentioned, I already mentioned all those players, so I don't have to do that again. And so that's kind of where we are for that game. Wolves, just kind of a situation of Vito Pereira is just trying to figure out the season a little bit here. One thing to talk about is they have a new wingback on the right side and Shacho Nula. With Ugo Bruno played on the other side. I don't necessarily know if Ugo Bruno is going to be that Nori replacement, but Chechenua, if I'm saying that name right, apparently clocked the quickest speed that we've seen so far in the league. So I don't really know if that means anything or not, but maybe a speed demon for Wolves to use for that wingback spot. Munetzi, Wang, and Arias. Arias didn't really have the best game, so I'd be interested to see if Rodrigo Gomez maybe plays going forward, or at least maybe Wang plays, gets a start still, and you actually get Larson back. I mean, to do this without Larson as well, Wolves should be okay, you think. Vita Pereira has at least done a pretty good job at managing them, but at the same time, little worrying signs to start the season. Um, and then let's see how we do. Brentford and Sunderland. Wadatara scores. It's offside. Then Shada with PK. Uh, the poor. It's poor. It's hit right to Ruffles. Sunderland are able to save that. And then we do get a PK. It's Tiago. We do get a goal. It's Tiago. Nice little 1-2 by Damsgaard. Then Onyeka gets free into the box. Nice cross in that Tiago is able to finish. But then shortly after that, Rico Henry comes on, gets a little physical in the box and brings someone down. It's a PK, and then Lafitte makes that. And then Isidore at the very end, where Shaka is able to get up across in the box late. Uh, this is a little bit worrying for Brentford. There's not much to talk about the game as far as that goes. Brentford lose Wise at the last minute as well, not really able to bring anyone in. So don't know if their thinking is to hold off until January. But the thing to talk about here is, Sunderland are the promoted side. They've got 304 passes. They've got 80% accuracy. Brentford have 283, 80%. Sunderland out XG'd them. They had more possession, more shots. 12 shots and 3 on target to 7 and 4. Brentford, this is worrying a little bit because again they're getting boxed in by these newer promoted sides already. They were not competitive. They were not competitive versus Nottingham Forest in the first game. Maybe you can explain that away. I didn't feel like they were, despite winning versus Aston Villa, I didn't really feel like they were that competitive in that game, at least in the second half either. They've got Watatari. They're going to need to be able to score a lot of goals on the counter. It feels like because they can't control the ball at all. Jordan Henderson back to play the club that he was first part of before he joined Liverpool in Sunderland. Jordan Henderson wasn't terrible, but again, it is another situation of him only being able to play 60 minutes or so, and then you got to swap him out. Didn't feel like Onyeka actually was that bad though for them. But Brentford, I don't really know what you can do. The other thing too is Rico Henry back from his ACL a year ago. A couple back-to-back weeks where he hasn't looked himself, and it's unfortunate for him as well because I don't really feel like the PK is really all his fault. There's a lot of infighting in that kind of respect, and then also a late cross that they allowed Shaka to get on the end of. It's first time hit, really nice and well done there. Isidore is right place, right time, but he kind of heads it low and is right to Flecken and not Flecken. It's head to Kellier, and it just slips underneath Kellier. That would have been nice for him to kind of have a moment to make that save, and he just wasn't able to do it. So a massive win for Sunderland, and then Brentford. They continue to kind of be a little worrying signs a little bit there, and then we'll move to Fulham and Chelsea. Chelsea went 2-0, and the only thing to talk about here was just with the VAR decisions, but also the thing to talk about is Delap gets hurt for them, and that really is a big moment because the awkward thing is they were in the moment of losing Nicholas Jackson to Bayern Munich, and then at the very end, they stopped that move only to allow it. Then what they did is they recalled Mark Yehu, who was on Sunderland on loan. They called him back, but they haven't really done the best when it comes to squad planning because they have the center back issue, and then they lose the lap to maybe miss they think till October or November or December for a bad hamstring injury. Now he doesn't have to have a surgery, but he's got to be out for 2 or 3 months. And Yao Pedro is not really the striker to play up the middle. So we might actually see Mark Gahey, start immediately for them, despite them not necessarily wanting him in the beginning of the season. That's interesting. They also made a deal to bring in Alejandro Garnacho, so we'll probably see him, start for them a little bit, soon as well. Chelsea were not really that great, and there was a moment where it felt like Fulham had their opening goal, where it's a pretty nice, turnover. They're able to get a transition going. I believe it's Munoz that gets the ball on the turn, and what he does is he's spinning and he happens to step on a foot of a Chelsea player, and that prevents the Chelsea player from being able to make a play on the ball. Um, and then they're able to play Josh King in, and then Josh King is able to beat Tosin and is able to beat the keeper. And the ref is asked to take a second look at it. The VAR referee says he thinks it's a careless foul. Uh, I don't really have an issue of them taking a look at it. I do think they bring him to the monitor, and it's not everyone's going at the VAR official, and the VAR official actually was taken off for it was punished after this. The head ref had the opportunity to make the call himself, and I didn't really like the language that was used either because it's not really careless. You hear this talk about coming together, but it's fine. A foot gets stepped on, and that prevents the defender from being able to play the ball, whether or not it's an accident or not. I'm a little bit more leeway to at least accept that decision. But that said, and the other thing that's hurts Fulham fans is this took forever to do to make the decision and to look at the replay. And so what happens after that? You get 9 minutes of extra time, and in the ninth minute, Chelsea get a corner kick, and they of course score on the corner kick. So that makes it 1-0. But I have the issue with the second one, and the second one is uh, there's like three or four different things that happen before the handball offense. And so basically, Chelsea get a PK because there's a cross whipped in, and the right back for Fulham does turn around and has his hand up. It is the right call in that respect, but there's so many things that happened before this. So one, Calvin Bassey, sticks a foot out and basically, gets stepped on. Now it's very, very small and minimal, but at the same time, it's not much different. Chalobah steps on, no, it's not Chalobah. Iwobi gets stepped on. So again, it's small, but at the same time, it's to me, you set the precedent to overturn this essentially. And they looked at that, and apparently it was nothing. But the other thing too is Yao Pedro uses his hand clearly to control the ball into the box in the buildup as well. So there were multiple reasons to not allow this one to happen, and they do. So I had more issues a little bit with the second goal than the first goal, though I think a lot of people had issues with both, to be honest. But that is what it is. Chelsea able to get by. They haven't necessarily been great. They were good versus West Ham, to be fair, but West Ham were so poor. But Chelsea are right there. They're one of the few teams. I think it's 3 or 4 teams now that haven't lost a game yet. Liverpool, I think Chelsea, and then maybe it's even not Bournemouth. It might be Crystal Palace that I don't think have lost yet. But that said, no Cole Palmer, and Chelsea have struggled in that respect. Yao Pedro has, flourished a little bit for them, and he's needed to. Uh, but I don't know what they're going to do without the lap other than Mark Gahey because they don't really have another striker on the team. They played someone like a Tyreek George, in the second half here, and the funny thing about this is Fulham liked what they saw. They actually ended up taking him. They recruited him on loan, and that's what they did on deadline day. So you're not going to have George to play going forward. And again, this is just a case of Chelsea maybe getting by with help or what. Fulham were really unlucky in that kind of respect, and unfortunate for the kid too, Josh King, who played really well and should have been able to celebrate with his goal. Um, the other thing too is Sesson Young starts, he gets the handball, and that's unfortunate for him because frankly, Anthony Robinson probably gonna get the get to start in his stead next after that. But yeah, Fulham just weren't able to really create what they needed to. One thing to say about this, I haven't seen a lot of people really talk about this game, so I guess I'll spend a little in that respect because everyone wants to talk about the decisions. Fulham were trying to press Chelsea and trying to get them to turn over, trying to speed them up as well. Chelsea were very good in that second half of keeping the ball and just tiring out Fulham legs. That's one thing you can say. Chelsea are very good in possession. Maybe it's not really the best going forward and the most entertaining, but when they have the game kind of sealed up and won, they're very, very good at just keeping the ball, and that is one thing you can give them credit for. So 420 some passes and 87% accuracy. Fulham were trying to turn them over in the second half, and they just couldn't. There was a moment where Fulham maybe could have gotten it to 2-1. Yao Pedro cleared off the line after I think on a corner kick. So Yao Pedro gets the goal and also had the clearance there. So good moment for him. And he continues to kind of be the most important player with Cole Palmer being out. And so that's where we are for this week's review. Thanks for tuning in. And what I'm going to try to do is I do want to talk a little bit what happened with U.S. soccer. And I think what I'll do is I'll make it a fun one because I'll include what happened in the Gold Cup because I have the script ready, but I just haven't really been able to do that the entire season. So I figured why not kind of combine them two? We'll do a nice little kind of memory walk down memory lane in that kind of respect. So we'll go over what happened with the Gold Cup, see if we can see if anything's changed since then with what just happened in this kind of window. I still have some issues to talk about as far as the player selections. There was a lot of heat on Pochettino after what happened versus South Korea. And I don't necessarily want to say that wasn't warranted because I do think it was. I don't really know what you would do after if you did try to move on him. Maybe some of that slided a little bit with the better results versus Japan, though. Again, I'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. Japan played basically a C like kind of roster, where they rotated a lot, so it didn't really matter that much. But that said, there were some positives, and we will get to some of that maybe tomorrow or the next day. So be looking out for that. And until then, you stay squatted and stop recording.